GIBBS viewers across Australia through TV3 in New Zealand, the BBC in England, in the UK, Screen Sport throughout Europe and Star Television in Hong Kong to Australia's great race, the Toohey's 1000. And as you can see, the weather is starting to close in. There being talk all day, a 30% chance of rain. I think that's blown out in the market. It is certainly looking very much like rain within an hour or so. But we have the competitors forming up. Dickie Johnson and Larry Perkins on the front row of the grid. Larry, of course, the winner of the Sandown 500 recently. Dickie Johnson blitzing them in qualifying yesterday in the Shell Sierra, taking pole position, and right behind the Mark Scaife, the defending champion, along with Jimmy Richards, and the new EB Ford Falcon, the Peter Jackson car, off position number 4. As I mentioned earlier, a tremendous crowd here at Mount Panorama for this fabulous sporting contest. We're not too far away from the start. 16 is, of course, the Holden Racing Team Commodore, Win Percy, Alan Grice. Sharing that car today, Peter Brock, of course, in the MOBIL Commodore number 05. We are 10 seconds away from the start of one of the really great sporting spectacles of Australia, the Toohey's 1000. Engines come up to rev, so they get off the line. Seaton makes and muffs the start, and it's Johnson up on the inside of Perkins with Mark Scaife looking for it, but he'll drop back one spot. 05 is stalled on the starting grid, Peter Brock. And Brock sitting there as the rest of the field goes through the first turn and works their way now up Mountain Straight. Dick Johnson away to a brilliant start. And there's the second of the Johnson cars back in car number 18 as Johnson starts to stretch it. Mark Scaife gets up very, very smartly indeed. Follows up. Mark Gibbs also away to a great start. The first of the Commodores, and Seaton now starting to pick it up. That's Thomas Mazier in the 15 car, qualified so strongly as they go over Repco corner and head up the mountain for the first time. Fabulous sight. Only Peter Brock stalling at the starting line.
A magnificent. There is shot of 05, Peter Brock. What a tragedy for the Holden fans. Fortunately, the rest of the field managed to miss him. There's his other car, car 55, Hideki, and Troy Dunstan. As this magnificent sight as the field streams across the mountain for the first time. Peter Brock just getting mobile on pit straight as they come across this sweeping, fast left-hander across the top of the mountain. The crowd going mad. A mix of V8s, turbos, and here we are, the turbo war. Dick Johnson leading the pack through, then the Works NISSAN, then GIBBS. Then the first of the HRT Commodores, Larry Perkins, and the first of the Moffat cars. A great mix on this first lap around Mount Panorama.
One of the great sights of motorsport anywhere in the world is a full field, fresh off the grid, come pouring down off the top of Mount Panorama, lion astern. All cars, maximum weight, top fuel at the present time. Tyres warmed up. Tail shaft problem with Brock's car, 05 apparently. What a tragedy that is for him. I mean, as if this is not a daunting enough task without getting left on the grid.
The exit to Mazda, Forest Elbow. We see the number 15 car go through on its way down the straight. Thomas Mazier at the wheel of that, beneath the GIO bridge. And here's Johnson, right behind him, Scaife. Mark Gibbs is the next in the Nissan. Then a helter-skelter. Larry Perkins, who lost the kick initially and now trying to fight back. And 05 being pushed down pit straight, has not started with that transmission problem. Rotten luck for Peter Brock. And you cannot, of course, cross-enter. So that means that unless they can get the car running, Brock's race is over. He never actually left the starting line.
Nissan race cam hot on the heels here of Dick Johnson as they come down across the start-finish line for the first time. One lap completed, 160 to go.
Just saw the back of 05 there next to the wall. What a tragedy for the Peter Brock fans there. I'll say half the crowd here are wearing the 05 colours today. That really is a drama for Peter Brock. But here we are inside the Nissan, and this is going to be a real battle of tactics here. Johnson, we're sure, is going to go out and set the pace for the race. But Fred Gibson, adamant that he's going to run with whatever pace the field wants to run. And just coming up pit lane, we have possibly a pace car, so there may be some movement in pit lane as well, while they get Peter Brock's car out of the way. So we're only into the second lap of the race. Johnson, Scaife, that's on the back of the Works NISSAN. Mark Gibbs holding position in third position as they come across the mountain for the second time. This is turbo country. Low ambient temperature, you're only talking about 10 degrees up here, and these things are really percolating.
Well, we'll certainly be able to generate pictures for you today from Dick Johnson's car, courtesy of Dunlop, and certainly the Mark Scaife, Jim Richards Nissan. Unfortunately, we can't do that with the Peter Brock car, the 05 car that is out of commission. There's the gap, first to second. Scaife just sitting in behind Dickie Johnson as we take the rear view of our Dunlop race cam. That's the gap, first back to second. And then a similar gap back to Mark Gibbs, doing a great job there in the GIO Nissan GTR. Back behind them, it's helter-skelter. There's about 5 or 6 of them debating fourth place. To the dipper. DJ, the pride of Queensland. And right behind him, closing for the kill, is Mark Scaife in the early stages of this Toohey's 1,000 for 92.
Yeah, they've made a bit of a break now on Mark Gibbs, and Scaife definitely sitting right on the tail of Johnson, looking for a passing manoeuvre here as they line up on Conrod.
Out of Mazda Forest Elbow again, down Subaru straight. There's the gap. Johnson's car running beautifully. Always a strong qualifying car in the Shell Australian Touring Car Championship this year. But the team that put the points together was, of course, the Winfield team Nissan with Mark Scaife, and he is the national champion, not only in the Tourers, but also Gold Star champion for the open wheeler set.
On outright speed, Dick Johnson's Sierra is the only car that can take the battle up to the Nissans at this stage. This first hour is going to be an absorbing contest. See if Johnson wants to try and break the back. Well, Mark Scaife ducks down the inside, and he will lead the great race as they come across the line for the third time.
So a change in the lead as the Nissan GTR goes through to lead it. Johnson hangs to the outside. He's going to let Mark Scaife set the pace for a while now. The Dunlop race cam shows the gap, first back to second as they work Mountain Straight.
As you've seen all week, straight line speed, there's nothing in this with these cars, and Dick's got the advantage of the toe. Pulls out of the draft, and this is just sheer horsepower. Aerodynamics working on these cars, 280 kilometres an hour as they head up Mountain Straight.
Dick's trying to blow him off before they get to the right-hander, but I don't think he'll make it there.
Scaife goes deeper under brakes. These guys will be mindful these cars are running on full tanks of fuel, new tyres, and they've got 6.5 hours of racing to go. And car 9, the O'Brien Brabham car, into the pits early, front wheels coming off. Looks like new tyres, nothing happening with the brakes. I wonder what's going on out there this early in the race.
John Brady?
Yes, Mike, it looks like it's tyres, and that's all. Rudy Eckenberger hopped in to try and have a quick look at the telemetry, but pulled out of it very quickly. And the car back in action, so something awfully unplanned there. So what's happened with the tyres is hard to pull. It wasn't a blown wheel, but it's certainly something Alan Moffat's second car can't afford.
So it wasn't a puncture or anything like that, John?
Doesn't appear to have been.
Okay, maybe Alan can update us on that as we pick up Mark Scaife. Number 9 rejoining the race. You saw the quick pit stop. It rejoins in 37th place. Scaife, the young gun, leads them down to Mazda Forest Elbow. Right behind him, Dickie Johnson, 17, the Shell Sierra, and Mark Gibbs and the Nissan GTR for GIO runs in third.
Well, Freddie Gibson said he'd have a look at the pace of the field in these opening laps and make sure the Nissan was running comfortably to its own race plan in the first hour. Well, it's a comfortable race plan. It's pretty ominous for the rest of them. Doing it very comfortably here in first position, opening a little gap on Johnson, and we're not even into the first 5 laps. Hard under brakes down to Caltic's chase. Johnson still hanging in second. Good position for Mark Gibbs, Rowan Onslow, and Bob Forbes' GIO GTR. A watching brief, sitting back in third place.
I notice another one going into the pits very quickly, the Kevin Waldock Ampol Playscape Sierra for an unscheduled stop, and they're also about ready to change tyres for the look of it. They've got the hood up.
John Hewson there working on the front right wheel, but there's something a little bit more important. I believe there's clutch problems with that car. Bonnet's up, and that's a drama for Kevin Waldock. This car normally bulletproof, certainly has been at Bathurst over the last 2 or 3 years, but having problems very early as we go back to the GIO GTR. Mark Gibbs at the wheel.
I believe the Synovus Vitamins car that came in, that Charlie O'Brien, the problem was that they'd flat spotted the tyres.
Worth keeping an eye out for his teammate, though, Klaus Niedzwitz in the other car. Niedzwitz now up to 4th place, having started from 10th on the grid.
Yes, Alan Moffat's come here with the Eggenberger Army once again. One of the most specialised engine tuners and car preparers in the world. Rudy Eggenberger's back for another attack at the mountain. Had cruelly robbed from him in 87, 88 once again. He's come very close in 89, so Rudy hasn't quite cracked the big one yet. He's come back here with an army of personnel, a whole lot of engines, engine telemetry, all the high-tech gear. And these Moffat Sierras for one last crack at the mountain before the turbo cars are banned forever.
I noticed the oil flag out on Mountain Straight. Keep an eye on that. The number 1 Winfield Nissan GTR, Mark Scaife, your race leader. Beautifully turned out car, very professional team. Everything falling into their hands early in the race.
Well, this was the last hurrah for the turbos. The weather has cooperated, hasn't it? Couldn't be better for these cars.
Little rain will also help too with the 4-wheel drive. But there's the gap. Great shot there from our chopper cam. That's first back to second. Mark Scaife disappearing down Subaru straight. Dick Johnson in pursuit behind him. GIBBS still running in the 3rd spot. And a gap opening out over those 3 cars as Dick hauls it down here into the left-hander at Caltex Chase.
I noticed another early casualty in the pits, car 31, the New Zealand tic-tac entry. Robbie Kerr got a problem as well, out of the action for the moment.
There is car 10, Klaus Niedzwitz. Man who's been quite impressive. Hasn't done a lot of racing this year, but dialed himself into this car quite quickly during the week.
Well, Klaus has come up to 4th. That would put Larry Perkins back to 5th. And he was very disappointed yesterday in the Toohey's top 10 shootout. Foot, as I understand, slipped off the pedals on 2 occasions.
Yes, there was a bit of mechanical hitch there. Greg Hansford and Klaus obviously have different sized feet. So what they tried to do in the middle of one of the sessions is move the throttle pedal over to suit Greg, and unfortunately, Klaus wasn't used to the setup, and his foot slipped off the throttle pedal twice. He was very disappointed when he came back to the pits. What they've done as a solution is to stick some abrasive paper to the pedal to stop his foot sliding off. So Klaus has lost out in the qualifying war, but Alan Moffat very confident last night. This car is going to run all day.
I was talking to Klaus last night, and he was saying that he believes that 1 or 2 people ran special qualifying engines in the top 10. Klaus said, we'll be racing with our qualifying engine. They had the race engine all the way through.
Yeah. Well, of course, Dick Johnson, I don't think there's much doubt there. Dick had everything turned up yesterday. Did a tremendous job. The Peter Brock car still stalled out there on the pits. With an update on that, it's Johnny Brady.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike. What they're trying to do at the moment, it's quite a scene here. They've sent the entire Brock crew up to get the car and try and push it onto the off-ramp up there near Hell Corner, and then try and duck it down to the lane behind the garages, which means they're going to have to negotiate some fairly quick-moving traffic when they do that, but they're determined to try and get it back. It was the tail shaft. They've got a spare one lined up in the garage. It's just a case of trying to get the car back there to do it. Of course, the race, unfortunately, is already shot for them.
It certainly is. Thanks, John, for that. Mazda Forest Elbow.
Klaus Niedzwitz spent a lot of time in these Sierras. He painted them in 1987. He's run them for about 6 years on and off. And he knows these cars intimately. Warm-up procedures, getting the cars right for qualifying. He spent a lot of time in these turbo Fords, and he'd love to go out a winner here today. Well,
the break, actually, between Mark Scaife and Dickie Johnson, about the same. It's out to a few car lengths. Then you can see further up Conrod Straight. But here's our race leader as we check them out for you on the Caltex race score. Jimmy Richards and Mark Scaife on lap 3 lead over Dickie Johnson, John Bowe and the Shell Sierra. Third is GIBBS and Rowan Onslow in the GO Nissan GTR. Then Niedzwitz and Hansford in the Synovus Vitamin Sierra running in 4th. Perkins and Harrington in the T-MART Commodore run in 5th place. 6th is Thomas Mazier and Bradley Jones, followed by Glenn Seaton and Alan Jones in car number 30. In 8th spot, 35, it of course is Wayne Park, David Parsons in the Peter Jackson Sierra. 9th, Wyn Percy and Alan Grice in the HRT Commodore, and rounding out the top 10, number 8, Colin Bond, and of course Johnny Smith in the Caltex Sierra. And we'll be back at Mount Panorama Bathurst in just a Panorama Bathurst. The Toohey's 1000 continues. Mark Scaife, your race leader over Dick Johnson. Mark GIBBS is the next one, followed by Klaus Niedzwitz, Larry Perkins.
That's the top 5.
And look behind Larry Perkins. You've got Perkins, who started on the outside of the front row, and Glenn Seaton in the Peter Jackson Falcon V8 has moved up right behind Perkins. Then you have the 2 Holden Racing Team Commodores, Thomas Maziera, then of course the 16 car. Fabulous battle here on Conrod Straight. Look for the power. And it looks like Percy.
Wyn Percy was slated to start on the car.
Well, there are only 4 of the new spec V8 cars in the race. 3 of them basically are on screen right now, and the other one, Peter Brock, unfortunately, still in the pits.
It's a good scrap going on here. Glenn Seaton in the Falcon, dueling with the HRT Commodore Thomas Maziera.
And on the subject of Brock, here's John Brady.
Yes, thanks very much, Gary. Peter, a far from perfect start. You just let the clutch out and crunch.
Yeah, I guess it's breaking a tail shaft. Moved. It's a brand new tail shaft put in this morning, which purely precautionary. And I could say 12 years racing Commodores have never broken one. So it's rather interesting racing situation. I'm just thankful that the drivers coming up behind me there gave me enough berth, because boy, oh boy, I was looking at that mirror for a while, I'll tell you.
Well, Peter, I hope it gets better for the rest of the day for you. At least you'll try and get it back out there.
Yeah, we'll get it back out there. Took a bit of time to convince the officials to push me to pit lane, but we're there.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, John, and to Peter Brock. Colin Bond in the pits.
So is the second B&H car, the 20 car.
Denny Holm car, he's sharing with Paul Morris. We've been watching this fascinating scrap. It involves Larry Perkins, who's running in 5th, of course.
It's an unscheduled stop from car 20 for this battle. Win Percy on the move. Car 16 overtaken car 15 with Thomas Mazzera at the wheel. And the new 93 specification Falcon locked in between them. And just ahead of this bunch, Larry Perkins. So the V8 settling down into some sort of a race pace at the moment. And the turbocharged cars for outright speed certainly with a big advantage up here today.
Over the top of Castrol, magnificent shot there as they come down through the dipper. And that's the order we're following, the 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th.
And I think on the back of the V8 Brigade is the second Works Nissan of Crompton and Anders Ollison, running at a more conservative pace than number 1, obviously.
That car moving up all the time now, up to 9th position there.
So, as they come down the straight, we go to the pits.
And the Colin Bond car in, unscheduled stop, the hood is up. Consulting with Colin, not a lot happening there.
This is a disappointment for Colin. This is a brand new car, built specially for Bathurst.
Johnny Brady's on the spot.
Yes, mate, they've got a bit of trouble here with the engine. They just haven't sussed quite what it is. As you say, brand new car built just for this race. They'd had the shell around for a while. It's only 3 months old, and not good sign already. They're starting to go into the spark plugs there. I don't know if they've got a head gasket problem. These cars used to have trouble. They've got oil pressure problem at the moment, and that's surging pressure for them, which is not a good sign in one of these at all. They're just trying to get inside the head there and see if they've got leakage in there, I would imagine. But for Colin Bond, brand new car and not a good start.
Thank you, John. Denny Holm has rejoined the race in 40th place in the Benson and Hedges BMW.
And Win Percy has taken Larry Perkins and moved up a spot.
Yes, so it's now Win Percy, who has moved to 5th in the race. Perkins is 6th. Glenn Seaton is 7th. Thomas Mazzera is 8th.
This is good early race form from the 16 car. It was a brand new shell built after the unfortunate accident at Sandown in qualifying. They've had a lot of trouble getting the suspension set up right on the car during the week, but I was talking to John Harvey just last night, and he said both Win and Alan are happy with the race setup. So the race setup's all you got to worry about here.
Oh, Larry locking one up on the way in. Maybe, yes, he was able to protect that spot. Seaton looked for an inside as Larry locked the tyre up. Ahead to Toohey's turn at the top of the mountain. And I guess you're going to find that fine balance between wanting to race and wanting to survive and be around at about 4:17 this afternoon. Perkins will have no problem with that. The second Winfield Nissan GTR with Anders Ollison, Neil Crompton. It's sitting in behind the second HRT Commodore here of Thomas Mazzera.
It's a pretty conservative pace to run at, and a very smart pace, I'd say. Everyone knows this is a very long race. This first hour of drama gets out of the way pretty quickly. You come down to the nitty-gritty of what Bathurst is all about, putting in consistent laps without a problem. You're at the sharp end of the field at the right time of the day. As they come down Conrad once again, Larry Perkins, the older VL Commodore, followed by Glenn Seaton. Very impressive performance from the new Falcon, hardly developed. I believe running about 100 kilograms over the minimum weight for this class, which shows how much work they've got to do on the car. And after early problems, the car's been running like a top most of the week. They have had niggling problems, and I guess everyone's thinking that's what's going to tip this car over. Little
problems, they're just ahead. Mark Gibson, the GIO Nissan GTR, was slowing coming out of that corner. Maybe it was a lap car that slowed him up.
Win Percy's got by him. And driving like a demon, isn't he?
He certainly is.
Interesting to see Gibbs has got the windscreen wiper going as well.
Here they come along pit straight. There's Mark Gibbs with the wipers going. Percy up one spot and disappearing after the leaders.
Percy trying to chase Klaus Niedzwitz, who's in 3rd place, and he's just over 6 seconds behind Niedzwitz at the moment.
Well, they say Win Percy has lost his communications to the pits. I hardly think they'd be trying to tell him to slow down anyway, would they?
Might not be a bad thing if it makes him go this quickly.
Thomas Mazzera pulling out for the inside run. And some chat going on with the Caltex car that's been pushed into the garage. John Brady being briefed on the problems there, so the Caltex CXT Sierra is not going to be a key player in today's great race with Colin Bond.
Great disappointment for the Caltex driver. Meanwhile, Mark Gibbs is slowly falling back into the clutches of the V8 Brigade. This high-speed four-car train of Commodores and the Lone Falcon.
Well, a traffic jam going behind him there.
And they're taking Anders Olofsson up as well as Perkins with the sniff of a turbo in front of him.
Now, I'm fascinated why Gibbs is running his windscreen wiper here. There's certainly no rain at the bottom of the circuit, but we may be getting a few spots of rain up the top.
Larry might be just too busy to turn it
Gibbs
off.
moving right over here. He has had a problem. I suspect there could be a possibility he's got some sort of water leaking from under the bonnet and it's coming up on the screen. I can't imagine why he'd have his wipers going when no one else is. But the other 4 cars have filed through now, including the Crompton Anders Olofsson car. Anders in the car, starting the car today. So the Gibbs GIO GTR seemingly in trouble. Keep an eye on that. He's back right off as they come onto Conrod Straight.
Well, there's Larry warming up. Shadow sparring this morning. He's off and running down the outside.
Under our camera on Conrod Straight, the Nissan gradually moving up to the field. So we'll have to keep an eye on Gibbs Onslow, who would appear to have some sort of problem there. The car's slowing quite dramatically on that lap.
We'll see whether Mark Gibbs takes it into the pits this time or is going to hang out there. I'd say he's staying.
No, he's out there with the wiper going.
So he's just dropped back a little. Johnny Brady will check that out with Bob Forbes and the team down there. He goes across to the inside, and he's trying to give them a signal about...
Well, and that gives an indication. I think he might have popped the windscreen full of oil, because as he went past the picture, they threw a bucket of water and detergent over the screen to try and wash it off. So someone's probably blown an engine when Gibbs has been right behind him, and that is just impossible to see through when it starts to smear all over the screen. So Gibbs apparently slowing only through a lack of vision. So the GIO car steps back to the blunt end of the top 10.
Co-sponsored by Windscreens O'Brien. So he's given his sponsor a bit of a plug on the way through. They poured cold water over it on the way past the pits last time. Perkins, Thomas Mazera, Glenn Seaton. And ahead of them, of course, is Wyn Percy, who picked them all up, was able to get by, and is now charged off into the distance.
So in this opening half an hour of the Toohey's 1000 for 1992, the V8's fairly evenly matched. Larry Perkins obviously adopting the right sort of pace for this first hour. Thomas Mazera, Glenn Seaton, and Anders Olofsson going along for the ride. Larry gets a little bit sideways as he's coming down through the dip. He's working hard as they barrel down the mountain once again.
They come out of Mazda Forest Elbow again. We've been following this scrap. Let's take our Caltex race score. They've completed 10. Richards and Scaife mark at the wheel at the moment in the Winfield Nissan GTR, leading over Dickie Johnson and John Bowe. Next is Needsvitz and Hansford. They're up to 3rd. Percy and Greiser to 4th. 5th is Gibbs and Onslow. They're all on the same lap. It just means that the leader's gone across. 6th spot is Perkins and Harrington, followed by Seaton and Jones in 7th. 8th is Mazera and Jones. 9th, Olofsson and Crompton. And rounding out the 10 is Wayne Park and David Parsons. That's the order here in the great race at Mount Panorama, Bathurst. The great race, the 30th anniversary edition. Lap 13 of 161. A long way to go. Checking Anders Olofsson making some inroads here in the 2nd of the Winfield Nissan GTRs. Larry Perkins has been passed there, and I notice David Parsons coming up very smartly indeed in the Peter Jackson Sierra, also making some ground.
Now Wyn Percy is really grinding away. He's got some tremendous race pace, even on the full tank. He's up to 4th position. He's closing on Klaus Needsvitz. At last point, he was 2 seconds behind, and he's closing the gap all the time. So he may have a turnaround in the top 3 with the inclusion of one of the new 93 spec Commodores. Meanwhile, the Nissan boys, there's pretty activity in the Nissan pits, with both the GIO crew and Freddie Gibson's crew looking like they're getting ready for a pit stop this early in the race.
Well, up front, Mark Scaife continues to lead the great race. I'll let him get through the next little section here down to Mazda Forest Elbow. Left-hander coming up. The exit to there. Now Subaru straight. 15 grand in the hand this morning after yesterday's efforts. And you're looking good, Dick Johnson.
Yep, how you doing?
Good, son. How's it feel? Great?
Yeah, it's pretty good, Mike. We're just sort of cruising on about the pace we want to go. I would have liked to have tried to put a bit more pressure on the NISSANs, but that's one of them things. Obviously, I might give John Keefe or John Large a ring shortly and see if they want to put another 100 kilos on him at the next stop.
Oh, don't do that to them, for goodness sake. The car feels right. You've got to wait to a good start.
Yeah, the car feels fine. You know, it's at this point, it's early days, though, Mike. You know that.
It certainly is. I'll let you get back to it. Thanks very much. We'll come back and talk later.
Thanks, pal.
Thanks, mate. Nicky Johnson running in second spot. Comes across the start-finishing line. And Win Percy, of course, has been the charger in the pack. And just look at this.
Third and fourth position. He's right on the bumper of Klaus Neeswitz in the Moffat Sierra. And Win Percy really has been on the charge in these opening laps of the Toohey's 1000.
I thought they may have started the race with Grice, but probably running conservatively. They know that Grice can wring its neck if it's needed later in the day, and it's capable of that happening.
Wynn's doing a pretty good job. He hasn't had a lot of time in the car this year. He hasn't done any racing, I think, since he went back to England at the end of last year after the Touring Car Championship.
Here comes the GIO Nissan GTR. Just to fill you in, the officials told the crew a while ago they weren't allowed to keep throwing water all over the fence or the wall.
Unfortunately, Mark got caught behind a detonating engine with blue oil all over the front of his car, and they're also doing a front tyre change as well. Hydraulic guns hammering away on the wheel nuts. They've been in there for just on 20 seconds.
They're trying to do it again.
But it is just impossible trying to drive when you're looking through a huge oil slick, which is getting progressively more and more smeared all over the screen. Gibbs goes out, 30 seconds.
It was really a stop that he didn't need.
GIO car rejoins in 15th position. They've dumped all that time, and I noticed they didn't do the mandatory thing of refueling the car or putting 4 new tyres on it.
I think they may have thought they were going to be a little quicker. Talking about quick, are they going to point Percy at the podium later today? Just look at him on the charge. He comes up behind Klaus Neeswitz and the Synovus Vitamins Ford Sierra of the Alan Moffat team. And young Winston coming down to Forest Elbow.
Well, there has been some debate over whether Wynn or Alan Grice was going to start the car this morning. I believe the decision was made on the start line.
Now, we'll look at the speed difference here. The Ford Sierra.
Well, Peter Brock, you'll be pleased to know, all the Mobile Commodore fans will be pleased to know, is actually in the race.
Just going to hold him up just marginally. Now looks like Bob Jones there.
Appears to be a bit of water or some film appearing on the screen of the HRT Commodore, whether that's rain.
There's a little drizzle.
So we'll keep an eye on that. There is Peter Brock in last place. Tragedy for the 9-time Bathurst winner. Boy, it's got tough for him. Back in 1987, he had a winning ratio by that stage of 2 race starts for 1 win, which was extraordinary. But since then, times have got tough for Brocky.
And there is light rain falling just outside our window here.
And a very strong breeze from the northwest blowing across the circuit. So we could be in for some pretty bad weather throughout this race.
You can see there on the windshield.
You can see the raindrops getting pushed over the screen of the HRT Commodores as he sits in the draft of the second Moffat Sierra.
I'll stand by for mayhem in the pits if this gets any heavier, because they're all going to be coming in.
So Win Percy, as I said before, not a lot of time in racing cars this year, but he's so impressed with this new 93 spec car with the big aerodynamic kit it's got on it. It's a much easier car to drive. Doesn't move around on springs like the other cars, the earlier model Commodores. Not nearly as physical car to drive, and that's really good for Win when he's dialing himself back into a car he hasn't really driven for 12 months.
So it is, must be a tough assignment. That is in the wet with a Sierra at Mount Panorama.
Well, actually, if it does start to rain, the Commodores won't be in too bad a shape, because with these big wings on it, it's a very heavy car, and this thing will work pretty well in the wet.
I understand that, but I was talking about the Sierra.
Well, the Sierra is another thing, yeah, as you say.
Dancing around a bit. Wind starts to put the pressure on, comes down the inside. They come through Castrol.
It's the great dice. These 2 very evenly matched. Obviously, Klaus has a speed advantage on the straights with the grunt of the Turbo Ford, 550 horsepower, as opposed to the probably just over 500 for the 7,500 RPM restricted V8. But Wynn is making up his time through the corners. Sensational handling down that side of the mountain, certainly showing the disadvantages of the Ford Sierra in this tight, twisty parts of the circuit.
Great shots there on our Dunlop race cam. It goes beneath the GIO bridge and works its way down Subaru Straight.
And Percy hard at work in the office of car 16.
Absolutely flat. And look at his approach shot here. Down on the inside. Moment of truth now for Klaus Nietsvits. And through we go.
Third place. Holden moves into the top 3 of the Toohey's 1,000.
Coming down some of the slower cars.
There are a lot of slower cars than Wynn Percy out there at the moment.
He really is on the charge. Car looks strong, handling well.
So got the clocks on him this time around. We'll see what sort of race pace the HRT setting will be relevant to whatever the Commodore's, the GTR, sorry, is doing. But the crowd's going mad here.
Talking about GTRs, the number 2 Winfield Nissan is a mover in the field now up to 6th position. Anders Olofsson at the wheel.
Anders drives the GTR in Japan. He's had a tough time out here. Same as Wynn Percy, but look at this. 3rd position, Wynn looking very comfortable.
And lapping 2:18.
2:18s. Well, it's a very strong race pace if they can maintain 2:18s all day. They'll be looking very strong in about 6.5 hours' time.
No doubt about the weather closing in here. There is our chopper cam shot with that rain coming out of the northwest. And we have an update. Showers and likely thunderstorms for Mount Panorama at Bathurst. Don't go away. Whatever you do, we can promise you a great race here today. Australian viewers, of course, an opportunity to win a trip to Indianapolis. You can ring in and nominate who you think will be 1st, 2nd and 3rd across the line here at Mount Panorama today. We'll give you some details on that just a little later.
Wynn Percy, 49 years of age, evergreen Wynn. Shares his time between both England and Australia. British touring car champ 3 times in a row, 1982, 82. And also won the Spa 24-hour race twice, 84 and 1989. He's a really experienced endurance campaigner. And he and Grice are an excellent driving combination for Bathurst today.
Well, he copped a bit of stick after his drive at Sandown, and it's great to see that he's back in absolute top form here at Mount Panorama.
There is our race leader, Mark Scaife, aboard the awesome, all-concrete Winfield Nissan GTR. These boys are looking very confident here today. Setting a pace which no one ever seems to be holding on to at this stage. And the car, despite all of this, looks very, very comfortable.
Just looking at the gap from Mark Scaife back to Dick Johnson. It's out to about 14 seconds. And everything looking good for Winfield Team Nissan as we check them out on the Caltex race score. Mark Scaife is the leader of the great race. 11.408 seconds in front of Johnson Bauer. Then in 3rd spot, Wynn Percy and Alan Grice. 4th is Klaus Nietsvits and Greg Hansford in the Sonova Sierra. 5th, car number 2, Anders Olofsson and Neil Crompton yet to drive. 6th, car number 15, Mazzera and Jones in the HRT Commodore. 7th spot, Larry Perkins and Steve Harrington in the Bob Jane T-MART's Commodore. 8:30, Glenn Seaton and Alan Jones in the Peter Jackson Falcon EV. 9th is 35, Wayne Park and David Parsons in the Peter Jackson Sierra. And rounding out the 10:55, Andy Medecky and Troy Dunstan in the Mobile 1 Commodore. And we'll be back in a moment. Mount Panorama Bathurst. We're working lap 18 of 161. Going to be a long day here. Hope you hang in with us. The weather's closing in. We've got a fascinating race going. Wynn Percy is closing on Dick Johnson. And we're looking back in the top 10 here for Andrew Medecky in the number 55. Mobile Commodore. David Parsons, the Wayne Park right behind him. And look who's coming up into 12th spot or 11th spot now is Tony Longhurst, or Johnny CECOTTO, I should say, in the number 25 Benson and Hedges car. So some great scraps in the middle of the field.
Now Peter Brock, of course, maybe looking at his car 55 running around, but he can't do anything about it. The new regulations come into force this year in the Toohey's race, no cross-entering, as we've seen in previous years. So Peter Brock will have to stick with 05.
And as we watch the battle for 10th, 11th and 12th position at the head of the field, Mark Scaife is circulating. Last lap time, 2 minutes 17.3. This is race time, remember?
That really is astonishing. If they keep that sort of thing up all day, they've got it in the bag. Unbelievable race pace.
Andy Badecki down on the inside.
The man they call Mad Andy. Certainly put on quite a show here in 1987 when he took on the works cars in a locally prepared Ford Sierra. Since then hasn't done a lot of racing. He was an open wheeler specialist a number of years ago in Formula Pacific and Formula 2. And look at this, Tony Longhurst pushing his way through the back markers. Comes up behind the Parsons Park Peter Jackson Sierra, and Longhurst on a charge. The car obviously proving fairly effective. Moving up through the field after that tragic incident in the warm-up this morning. Certainly shocked everybody. And you can see he's still wearing a bit of the battle damage. Lots of the magic tape holding it all together on the front there.
One car that isn't too effective is car 50, the Sierra, driven by Brian Sala. Kevin Weeks, I see it's been parked over in the pits for about the last 10 minutes. It's not going anywhere for a long time.
Such is the pace of the great race. 15 cars only are left on the lead lap, and we're only 40 minutes into the great race.
And again, it's a pretty solid pace. There's the Sala Weeks Queensland Plastics car, the Sierra, in the pits that we just mentioned, and the battle that has been continuing for 10th, 11th and 12th. Johnny CECOTTO and the Benson and Hedges number 25 car. Here comes Johnny.
Well,
it was really a bump in the wall in the warm-up they didn't need this morning.
You can see the tape down the side edge, left-hand side of the guard there. The bonnet and everything was pushed out of alignment. It was quite a heavy whack. It didn't look that severe on television. By the time they got it back to the pits, there was damage apparently to the chassis rail. And the front guards apparently moved around a little bit, which is a great shame. But apparently Tony, just before the race, was saying he's fairly confident that the most important part of the suspension system hasn't been damaged. As he proves that theory, sneaks down the inside of Parsons Park, car 35. So Tony on the charge as well. But he's got a lot of work to do.
Race leader.
Johnny CECOTTO, I should say.
Race leader Mark Skate now has a 17-second break over second place Dick Johnson. A further 20 seconds then to win Percy in the third car, the Commodore Chevy V8.
Well, we've been watching the scrap in the middle of the field. Any number of dices going on at the moment. Certainly we're also following the ride to the front by Win Percy, or at least to try and haul back. The man who's dominated the race since the second lap, and that, of course, is Mark Skate.
Johnny CECOTTO using all the road as he swings through into Caltech's chase on the charge, trying to make up this deficit as he's picked his way through the field. He's obviously cutting some very quick laps here. Former World 350cc motorcycle championship, or champion I should say, made the transition to racing cars, reached the very heights of Formula 1 before having a shocking accident which put him out of open wheelers and into touring cars, and since then he has been one of the fastest, most consistent touring car drivers in Europe.
Here's the man leading them all, the merry dance in the number 1 Winfield Nissan, Mark Scaife. In fact, the Winfield crew now got both their cars in the top 5. Anders Olofsson at the wheel of the number 2 car in 5th position, 45 seconds astern of his teammate, but making up miles of ground. John Brady's with team leader Fred Gibson.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Fred, 18 laps in about 18 seconds. It's not a bad run.
No, it's not going too bad, John. The whole thing is exactly what we thought would happen. The pace dropped off very quickly, and we're all doing 17s and 18s now. It looks like raining as well, so I think a lot's going to happen as the day goes on.
And there are a lot of people here ragging up saying, I hope it doesn't rain. You are absolutely hoping it pours, I would imagine.
Yeah, we are, John. Really, if it rains, it's good for the cars, it's good for the four-wheel drive on the cars. But, like, you know, I don't really mind if it stays dry. We'd like to have a race as well. It's going according to plan so far. There's a long way to go yet, pal.
There was talk Dick Johnson might try and burn you guys around at the start and hope to wait and make something break. Obviously, you answered that.
No, the thing is, Mark was going to attack if Dick wasn't doing his pace, and Dick was really holding Mark up a little bit. We wanted to sort of do our own pace in the race. We've done that. We sort of broke them down. Really, now it's a matter of setting ourselves a pace for the rest of the day.
Fred, thanks a lot. Good luck.
Thanks, John.
Freddie Gibson sounding, well, reasonably confident for Fred, and he should. I don't know how much more confident you feel. I know it's a long way in this race, and things are looking good. He's got a young charger there in Mark Scaife as we take the Nissan race cam. And the brake's a bit of a tap.
Freddie's just so confident about this car. Been totally rebuilt from front to back, both car 1 and 2. He's over-engineered the car, he was telling us yesterday. Everything else, suspension components, everything through the car has gone one size up. So he's over-engineered the car, allowing for the weight. And all these guys at the Nissan team are very confident this car will just rocket around here for 6.5 hours, and I believe so as well. Mark Scaife hard at work in the office of the GTR. Word is from the weather station that we're going to have heavy rain within the hour. which will once again fall into the lap of the GTR. Cotter-Dillman.
Former class winners here, Mount Panorama, 1989. This is the same car, or that was the same car, the Impala Kitchens car, as we go back to race leader Mark Scaife.
Picking his way through the traffic. One of the dramas may emerge in this race later on. 28 rookies in this year's race, almost a quarter of the drivers in this year's field are here for the first time. And if it starts to rain, it's going to be quite a drama for the fast guys picking through the inexperienced drivers. And I guess that's what caught Johnny CECOTTO out this morning. Just an example, perhaps, of things to come. Well, one man that's not a rookie here is Bob Tyndall, the well-known sports sedan driver, but we haven't seen much of him. We won't see much of him either. His 75 car, the Binding Smash Repairs entry that he's sharing with Frank Binding, has been out of circulation for about the last 10 minutes with a mechanical problem. I doubt that we'll see them again. Cracking pace in the lead GTR. Fred Gibson have a smile ear to ear, and as has been said so many times, if it starts to rain, it all just falls into the lap of the GTR. Your race pace comes down. Critical things like turbo temperatures and gearbox temperatures all drop. And, of course, the added traction of a four-wheel drive system will just make it so much easier for Freddie. So Scaife continues on his merry way. As we go inside the Nissan GTR with Nissan race cam. An image of concentration. Feeds at gears and the Hollinger 6-speed gearbox as he heads up Mountain Straight. Into fourth. Picks up fifth as he heads towards the Nissan sign and the hump. Car getting... And he goes back through the gearbox and swings up into this steep right-hander as he heads toward the top of the mountain once again.
There's the man running second, Dick Johnson, car number 17, the Shell Sierra. He's coming up to put a lap, I think, on Graham Moore, I believe it is, in the Strathfield car radio entry. That's the Triple M car that'll be driven later today by Wayne Gardner. And 2 laps on the BMW 635 of Ray Golson. Race starting to settle down into the pattern. Mark Scaife disappearing into the distance as we welcome Doug Mulray to the call team. Doug, good to have you aboard.
Nice to be here, Mike. It's been a fantastic race, a dramatic race first up. A lot of disappointment with Rocky, but he's back out there. And the people at the top of the hill will be more than pleased about that. Look at this. There's the Strathfield car radio entry, the Triple M car, Dr. Dan on the bonnet, about to lose a lap to a hard-charging Dickie Johnson. I was surprised to see Dick let the Nissans get away like that, Mike.
Yes, they have a, as we've said over the last couple of days, Nissan really do have a bulletproof package here. It rains, that also gives them some advantage. Oh, this is interesting stuff.
Is it?
Graham Moore, I believe, at the wheel.
Yep.
Move over, Mr. Moore.
Taking the first stint in the Strathfield car radio's Commodore. Wayne Gardner will step in after. And Dick Johnson leaves him far behind as he works down Conrod Straight one more time.
Well, Dick, in fact, when we had that race cam chat, indicated he'd like to have been able to keep the pace on a little more on Mark Scaife, keep the pressure on him.
But he's got the cooking engine in today, of course. Yesterday, I believe they were making 630 horsepower for the shootout.
Yes, I think they might have had a very special motor prepared for qualifying yesterday. Got pole, but at the moment, it's Mark Scaife out in front, doing it comfortably, 18+ seconds in front. Down to the end of Conrod Straight.
So Mark Scaife continues to lead the great race. Dick Johnson, car 17, hanging in second. Win Percy aboard the first of the Holden Racing Team Commodores in third. And Klaus Needswitz in car 10, one of the Moffat Sierras. Rounding out the 5. The second of the Works GTRs with Anders Olesen at the wheel.
Oh, Mark Scaife will be looking for his second Bathurst victory if he can take the checkered flag here today. He's 19, nearly 20 seconds ahead now of Dick Johnson in the 17 Shell car. Dick, of course, a 2-time winner here previously, and looking for number 3.
That gap between second and third doesn't seem to have changed at all, Gary.
No, still 20 seconds.
Johnson.
Yeah, 20 seconds. It's the leader that's getting away a fraction, half a second of lap at the moment.
Well, as we said all week, the cracking pace these Nissans, they proved it last year that they can run at a very consistent, very fast pace all day. And if no one can keep up with them, they're getting at least a second lap advantage. You just can't let guys get away from you that quickly. in that period of time.
Outside of the gap 1 to 2, the next big gap is between 5th and 6th, between the second Winfield Nissan car and the 15 Holden HRT team car.
The word we've had is that there will be heavy rain at the circuit in 1 hour or less, and there's some action in the pits. The boys are getting out the wet weather tyres.
Down to you, John.
Yes, thanks very much, Dougie. It's getting a little cold down here, and already you've got the tyres getting set up. Over on the end there, you have the first set of intermediate tyres, which they would go to. They've got 2 grades of intermediates. The second one here, a slightly thicker tread, some tread that is more recognisable to the ones we'd use on our cars on the outside, and of course straightened on the inside. These again are a softer compound, and then you go to the full-on wet weather tyre, which looks basically like a very chunky road tyre. They are getting them all ready at the moment. Talk is heavy rain within the hour, and the interesting thing in all of this is while these pits get all their tyres ready, the Nissans are really taking their time over it, because they can stay out without going to the intermediates for a lot longer than anybody else. And if it happens to go wet and go dry, they won't even have to stop, and that will just make this a cakewalk for them if the cars stay in one piece.
You're right, and if you come out of the garage, John, it's raining.
It's raining, all right.
Carports of the rich and famous.
It has started to... Well, it's on the way to pouring here, pitch straight.
And it's going to be very, very tricky out there as the rain comes in. And we'll see what that throws up in the next hour or so of Australia's great race. Klaus Niedzwitz just getting it a little sideways coming out of the corner, and I think he might be one of the first to head to the pits. He's going to take the punt.
It's getting slippery out there.
The B&H BMW was going to do the same, but that'll give you an indication of how slippery it is.
Klaus.
So that's happening on the way into the pits. We'll keep an eye on what's happening around the racetrack.
You don't want that happening to you on top of the mountain. Klaus comes into the Moffat pit. Got the clocks going on him. A quick stop, get the wets on. And they're also doing some refueling there as well, making it a mandatory stop. Weren't scheduled to come into the pits a bit later than this. Lap 32 was the first scheduled stop. And look at this. This is really raining now. Mount Panorama, the track's starting to get a sheen on it. They'll be able to survive out there on slicks for a few laps, but this is going to start getting very greasy. Ooh.
That's Anders Olofsson just coming up on the inside of Andrew Harris.
Well, I don't know if you believe in fate, but it's falling into Freddie Gibson's lap after all the political infighting about this car.
Now, we're with the race cam, the Dunlop race cam, travelling with Wyn Percy. Winner's running third on the road at the moment. The Moffat Sierra is in the pits. Let's go down.
Well, thanks very much, Mike. It was supposed to be just a quick tyre change, but Rudy Eggenberger suddenly jumped in with a great deal of rush. It looks like they've got some problem down with the stub, but the quick tyre change that was meant to be is not. And at the moment, it could be a tie rod end by the way they're shaking the ends of the wheels on both sides. Some sort of steering problem anyway. And this is causing more than a little concern to Alan Moffat. It's supposed to be just a very quick change.
That looks like a turbo pipe.
Well, they've got a problem there. They had to come in 10 laps early, and this is going to create even further problems as the race unfolds, Doug.
Yeah, that Klaus Niedzwitz pit stop is 10 laps earlier than was scheduled. If they go in 10 laps early, of course, it means a number of the lead cars coming in to do this sort of stop because of the rain will have to stop again. They'll have to schedule an extra stop.
There's been plenty of drama in the pits. Car 25, Tony Longhurst, went back in again. He's rejoined in 13th position, so all that hard work that Johnny CECOTTO's done has been undone. So he heads it back out on the track, and look at the amount of water on the screen of the HRT Commodore. Wyn Percy driving very gingerly as they come into Caltex Chase. I'm sure Wyn will be on his way to the pits as well. There's going to be some sensational pit activity in here over the next 2 or 3 laps.
David Parsons in and out, and here's Dick Johnson coming in now to put on to wets. John Bauer stands there.
He's out of the car.
Dick's climbing out, and John Bauer, we take our friend the Holidays pit report.
Moffat Sierra, meanwhile, has been in the pits for 2 minutes, 20 seconds. They've dropped a lap.
The Peter Jackson Sierra entry, the 35 car with Wayne Park at the wheel, has been in and put wets on and rejoined the race. Car 35 has rejoined the race in 14th position.
So Wyn Percy stays out there on the slicks, as too does the car 1.
Great day at the office. Sierra, Turbo Sierra at Mount Panorama trying to catch up ground.
Meanwhile, car 20, the second of the B&H BMWs, come into pit lane as Wyn Percy cuts his way through the spray. Dick Johnson has been in for wets. The car's rejoined in 5th position. Plenty of activity down in the pits. The Hull Morris, the second of the B&H BMWs. On go the wets. Plenty of drama and excitement. And we've just gone through the first hour of the race. In comes the second Brock car. Car 55, Andrew Medic. He locks the brakes as he gets on the wet concrete. Air jacks out. Tyres off.
There's a big problem for the Moffat team, Gary.
Yes, they've only got the one overhead, and they can't bring the 2 cars in at once. So while this one's still stuck there, the second one is out on the track. They've got to keep going around on the slicks.
On just the worst kind of tyre for these conditions.
Well, they're losing a lot of time doing this. And I see the 2 Nissans are both out on the track as well, so they're losing an equal amount of time. Car 10 in the pits. It's just rejoined. That's
Needsvitz, and he's gone back and he's a lap down after that very long stop.
Olofsson, of course, has gone through. Winner's trying to make it to the pits. But Olofsson has gone through, past Percy.
So it's Winfield Nissan 1-2.
The way it looks at the moment as they head down to Forest Elbow. Kevin Waldock there in the Ampol Playscape Ford Sierra, who had a stop earlier this morning. They had problems with that car. Trying to keep them straight on the exit to Mazda corner there.
And there is a visual difference in track speed here as Anders Olofsson just moves away from car 16. Wynne just gingerly bringing the car down the mountain on slick tyres on a wet track. It's pretty hairy stuff.
I've just learned that the problem with Moffat's car, the 10 car, was the steering rack. The steering rack was in fact loose.
It's not the sort of thing you want to happen this early in the race.
Or in these conditions.
This is very, very slippery out there. Car 55, Andrew Medecki car, rejoins in 12th position, out on wets. So they're coming into the pits, one after the other.
Graham Moore heads into the pits, and I think you'll find that Wynne Percy will be pit-bound now.
Percy follows him. I think that may be Kevin Waldock behind them. And the 2 Nissans
can stay out there.
Out on the track on slick tyres.
And it looks like, as you said, Graham Moore coming in. Wayne Gardner, I can see, is getting ready. I think he's going to take over that car.
Oh, in the wet.
Now, you talk about Bathurst rookies. Wayne Gardner's probably got the toughest job he's ever had in a car he's not completely happy with. HRT swings into pit lane. Car 16, Wynne Percy getting out. Alan Grice getting ready to get in. Meanwhile, Graham Moore has brought the Strathfield Car Radio's Commodore in. And yes, Wayne Gardner is getting in. So Wayne's going to have a crash course.
Wrong one.
Maybe the wrong choice of words there.
Most unfortunate.
Richard Hayes in the pits there, covering that for us, Richard. Probably trying to get out of the way here, because Gricey's ready to roll.
Well, I just had the clock on that, 30 seconds. Good, slick stop. 16 rejoins in 6th position. Meanwhile, Wayne Gardner's not going to get his belts on. Graham Moore giving him some last-minute instructions.
Well, if he thought this was a handful in qualifying in the dry, he's in for the ride of his life now.
Wayne wasn't happy with the handling characteristics of the car in the dry at all, and I imagine all of those problems will be magnified in these conditions. Not a happy Vegemite.
Well, he's a guy, and here we are. Brock back in the pits. What a miserable day for Peter Brock.
Yes, that's true. I mean, he couldn't have got off to a worse start, but the way this is panning out with the weather and all, it's going to give him his best chance to at least get back in the fight here somewhere.
Rain is certainly the great equaliser. We've seen Brocky up here in Commodores before. Spectacular handling of a big Holden V8 in the wet.
And he couldn't see another problem on the inside. The windscreen was all fogged up. But there's probably a great variation in temperatures around the circuit when top and bottom.
And certainly when you get a sudden drop in temperature, the rain hits, the cabin temperature makes all the screen fog up, which a lot of these guys are suffering now.
Let's throw down to John Brady.
Yes, thanks very much, Mike. Brocky, as Wilco said, it's probably in some ways the better thing to happen for him. Very quick stop from Peter Brock. He probably sees this as a bit of a chance, although obviously any real prospect is gone already. But down in the pits at the moment, there are so many cars with tyre changes. It is near chaos. Gardner coming out, almost collected. Brock coming in, and as much excitement in here as they get in and out as there will be when they go sliding around the top of the mountain.
Meanwhile, car 18 in the pits as well, the second of the Dick Johnson entries. Greg Crick, I believe, getting into the car.
Terry SHIEL drove the opening stint in this car, is now handed over to Greg Crick.
You said earlier, Mark, that rain was the great equaliser. Well, Fred Gibson has just said there's no plan really for them to come into the pits. They've got the four-wheel drive. They're staying out there.
Unbelievable.
The 18 Shell cars rejoined the race in 11th position.
And that is one of the great advantages of the GTR. And Anders Olofsson has now moved up behind car number 1, Mark Scaife.
Whoa! Oh. Now there's a classic example of understeer. Brocky on his brand new Bridgestone wets, going straight on as he comes up through the cutting. That's an indication of just how slippery it is out there.
The David Parsons Wayne Park Peter Jackson Sierra has been in.
Glenn Seaton's been in and changed tyres, rejoins in 7th position.
So they're all coming in. You can just see how wet it is out here. The rain's still coming down quite heavily on pit straight. And that dry line you can see through the wet there is slowly being consumed by the water. And it is a remarkable indication, as Michael said before. The Nissan's still out on slick tyres, still putting in quite effective lap times. Peter Brock, 9 times winner, not the best start to the great race. But as long as Brocky's out on the track, there's always a chance of a good result.
Sliding past the NEC entry, their W635, with care.
It's all been new for Brocky, because I rather doubt they've done one lap in the VP in the wet anywhere in testing.
It's very difficult to get a car set up. I guess a lot of these guys, ones who are clued into the fact that the weather may have changed, may have gone for an intermediate setup on their suspension settings. But if the car's set up for dry weather running, it'd be pretty atrocious in the wet.
Mark Scaife continuing to lead. In the number 1 car, Anders Olofsson runs in 2nd. Nissan 1-2 at the moment. 15, Thomas Mazera in 3rd spot. Dickie Johnson in 17. Then followed by Alan Grice, Win Percy. Then Perkins in number 11 and Glenn Seaton in number 30. That's the order jumbled up. And after coming in, car number 42, Wayne Gardner, now position 19.
Rain Gardner, they've written him up as on the scoreboard. I think that's quite amusing. Brutus with his sense of humour working on the commentary team once again.
So, car 1 stays out on slicks. Mark Scaife, cool, calm and collected.
That's confident, isn't it, to go out in this weather on slick tyres when everybody else is running around on wets.
Well, as you can see, this sort of the flat part of the track, there is still a dry line out there. And as long as that dry line exists there, I'm sure Fred will keep the cars out on slicks, because if the weather changes, you've only got to get a bit of wind drying off the track surface and you're back to dry conditions again.
Well, not a punter on the hill has moved. We'll check them out for you on our Caltex race score. Jimmy Richards, Mark Scaife continue to lead the great race over Olofsson and Neil Crompton. 3rd is the Percy Grice car, followed by Mazera and Jones. 5th, Johnson and Bauer in the number 17 car. In 6th spot, it's Larry Perkins and Steve Harrington. 7th is Glenn Seaton and Alan Jones. 8th spot, car number 4, the Mark Gibbs Rowan Onslow GIO GTR. 9th is 25, Tony Longhurst and Johnny CECOTTO. And rounding out the 10 is SHIEL and CRICK. Don't go away, there's more drama to come.
Welcome back to Mount Panorama. The first hour of the great race just gone, and a whole series of triumphs and tragedies packed into those 60 minutes. Let's update them for you now. And here we are at the start with Johnson blazing away in the Sierra. He got away to a great start. Scaife up into 2nd after a little while. Mark Gibbs in the Nissan 6th up to 3rd. A good start for him. Larry Perkins, the first of the Commodores, away, and Glenn Seaton in 5th spot. But that was the tragedy. Peter Brock with a broken tail shaft. His race gone in the first minute. Then on lap 2, Scaife passed Johnson to take the lead. Ominous sign with the current weather conditions of rain here at the moment. Then action in the pits as well. Bad news for the Alan Moffat team with the number 9 Sonova Sierra in for tyres. The good news was that their number 10 car was in 4th place with Klaus Nietswitz at the wheel. Win Percy passed Glenn Seaton in the battle of the V8s for 5th spot on about lap 4. And then later on, Mark Gibbs, who'd been up amongst the leaders, was passed by Percy, Perkins and Mazera because of oil on his windscreen. You see it being washed away there. Brock back in the race, but in last place. There'll be no number 10 for Peter Perfect this year. Scaife out in control at the other end of the spectrum in this race. Godzilla cruising around the mountain, sucking in that cold air in the big V8s, and then the rain came. It'll be a story of changed tyres now and changed fortunes. Plenty of action in the first hour of the great race.
Thank you, Cameron Wiggins, bringing us right up to date there with what's happened in the first hour of the event. There's a little rock that's come off on the run up to the cutting.
I hope Dick Johnson doesn't see that. He'll have apoplexy after events of 10 years or so ago.
Fortunately, the racing line is well across to the right as the GIBBS Onslow GIO GTR carrying along.
That problem that Brocky's having is a demister not functioning. not something you'd expect to bother a racing car.
No, you're right there, Doug.
There's our race leader, Mark Scaife, in the Winfield Nissan #1. Somebody was asking the question about how the rain affects lap times. Well, he was going around. His fastest lap prior to the onset of the wet was 2:17.1. This lap, last lap, was 2:33.8.
He exits Mazda Forest Elbow. Out the straight, about to put a lap on one of the Mobile Commodores. As he swings by on Subaru straight, heading down to the chase.
Variable weather conditions. You can still see a lot of spray coming off the tyres. Peter Brock in all sorts of trouble back on the circuit. The Mobile car at least circulating. And the Nissans, in this early stage of the race, we're only an hour, 10 minutes into it, look to have it by the throat already.
Yes, with the advantage of four-wheel drive, if the rain keeps falling, looking at the incredible grip they seem to have on slick tyres, you can imagine the Nissan trifecta, can't you? Because the other advantage is that they slow down, they take the pressure off their components. That weight thing isn't going to be nearly as large a problem. Brakes aren't going to be as heavily tested. It gives them the box seat.
Right.
Order still the Nissans, 1-2. Dickie Johnson over Larry Perkins, and then Thomas Mazira. Alan Grice is the next driver, and Sanova's number 10 car is now in the pits.
Back in. Look where the tyres going on. A few dramas, as we saw earlier. Loose steering rack. One of those, as you can imagine, there's an enormous amount of preparation time. You think you've checked every nut, bolt, screw on the car, and then that happens. There we are, Jim Spears, car 26, Darrell Hendrick, John Blanchard, Commodore. And they appear that their race is run. Low budget effort, not a lot of money involved. Come up to Bathurst for a crack at the big race, but their day is over fairly early.
If you've been waiting for some good news on the Colin Bond, John Smith Caltex entry, there isn't any. It's still parked away in the pit and won't be going anywhere. Their second team entry, the number 7 car, driven by Peter Hopwood and Terry Bostonjack, is out there, and they're doing a good job. They're in 21st position at the moment.
Klaus Needsvits, saw in the pits, has rejoined in 16th position.
Mark Scaife, hard at work in the lead Nissan GTR. Still got the wiper going. The car proving to have leech-like grip in these slippery conditions. And Wilco, I believe a Nissan 123 wouldn't do you too badly.
Well, my own perceptions of the weather here told me that it was going to rain today, and I took the precaution of boxing the trifecta Nissan first, second and third, yes.
Well, the weather has turned in favour of the Nissan team here today. The greatest dread when this supercar first appeared on the scene was if we ever had a wet Bathurst, you could put down the glasses. Geez, they're putting in a strong performance in these very difficult conditions.
I've just been advised that Colin Bond is out there and circulating, but he reports no oil pressure at this stage.
Well, it's not going to be out there long then, Doug.
It's going to cause him some problems. It's finished.
I'd say our race leader, who's allowed that to happen, Mark Scaife, is already undoing the belts, getting ready for Jim Richards. And he is now headed to the pits. What a combo, the four-wheel drive and the best rain driver in Australia to take over from you, Jimmy Richards.
And of course the big advantage for the Nissans too, if the pace really backs off, they may be able to get down to one pad change as opposed to the two they were suspecting to do in the hot conditions. So they'll pick up even more time if that's the case.
Let's go down to John Brady for this Prima Holidays pit report.
Yes, thanks, Mike. A little bit of timing for the Nissans. What they've done is they've tried to hold off onto the slicks as long as possible. It's not that far away from when they would have done a tank change and a driver change anyway. So they've decided to go to the wet weather tyres now. They've already made a big dent on everybody else. And Jimmy Richards, as you say, you couldn't get a better man to be handling the wet. And you couldn't really have a much better stock than this one's looming up for them so far. Just waiting for the churn to go in. The car seems ready as soon as the petrol drops. And when the crew's ahead of the petrol tank, that's as good as you can ask it to do. Coming up to 29 seconds now, and they're about to fly. It's pretty good for a driver change and a full set of tyres. 34 seconds, and off goes Jimmy Richards.
Oh, how hot is the Winfield Team Nissan?
That was basically their scheduled stop. Yep. They were expected to come in lap 31. They came in lap 30.
And of course they rejoin in first position, which is not bad.
So Jimmy Richards takes over from Mark Scaife. He's done a tremendous job. The opening stanza of this race. There he goes, up Mountain Straight for the first time.
Jim Richards, an acknowledged rain master.
As you can see, a little bit of fog on top of the mountain as 55, the Andrew Medici, Troy Dunstan car, the Mobile 1 Commodore, comes in for a pit stop.
And
I don't think Maud's going for a ride.
Graham Brown, Rock's team manager, in there trying to spray the demister. Well, the no fog on the inside of the screen. They're all suffering the same problem. If you haven't got enough to contend with out there on a big greasy track, if you can't see where you're going, it's almost an impossible task.
Water outside the windscreen and on the inside. Look at that, you can see that. That must be very distracting in these conditions.
When you get that greasy film build up on the inside, you can Andrew screaming at them to get some more of it off. So the rain has turned this race upside down. Andrew Medeki doesn't do a lot of motor racing these days. He's a guy who does do a lot of motorsport. Glenn Seaton having a drink on the bottle.
It's morning tea time.
But this guy just looks so relaxed behind the wheel of a racing car. It's almost beyond belief.
He's carrying our Castrol race cam for us today in the Falcon EB, running 9th on the road at the moment. And he'll hand over to another guy who's used to the wet too, and Alan Jones. He honestly looks like about a 14 or a 15-year-old, doesn't he, Glenn?
Especially with the tube in his mouth taking liquid refreshments. I can't relate to that. I was a breastfed baby.
Here we go. More action in the pits. Car 9, the second Moffat Sierra comes in, as too does Thomas Mazzira. Oh, comes into the pit lane as well. So get the clocks going on this stop.
Let's take another Primo Holidays pit report with Richard Hay.
Well, Mazzara's just got out of the car. Brad Jones getting in. Spare a thought for these four mechanics. They've been out here in this rain, and so far they've had to put slicks, then intermediates, then wets as the weather changed, all within the space of about 5 minutes. Brad Jones now inside of the car, fuel finished, engine fired up and away to go. A very quick stop there for the second of the HRT cars.
Thanks, Richard. Yes, very effective stop. Just over 21 seconds for that. 4 new tyres and a driver change. Brad Jones back in the second car. There's Alan Moffat.
Problem here. Can't get his car away. Now they're gone. Rudy Eggenberger there as well.
All happening in the pits, and of course the Nissan team standing by for Anders Olofsson to come in, and I would expect handover to Neil Crompton. There's the Falcon EB disappearing up Mountain Straight in the direction of the right-hander at Repco Corner. Number 9 rejoining the race. That's the Synovus Sierra of Alan Moffat's in 16th position.
Glenn Seaton gently feeding in the power of the 520 horsepower V8. This thing wouldn't be a bad car to drive around in these conditions. It's very heavy, about 1,400 kilos at this stage. Big aerodynamic kit on it. Seems to use its tyres fairly well. And it'd be a nice thing to have on a slippery track. Certainly a lot better than the Ford Sierra, which Glenn may have been driving here.
Here we come. 2 Nissan. Anders Olofsson coming into the pits.
Neil Crompton waiting to get into the car. We've got the stopwatch going on this change.
Down to you, John.
Yes, thanks very much, Mike. As we pointed out earlier, this is roughly when NISSAN were going to change anyway. It just couldn't have happened better for them. They've managed to stay out on the slicks. Now they'll go to the wets. That'll make them even more dominant. And all this at a time when they were ready to go anyway. Another driver change. Again, they're just so spot on with this crew. Again, the thing I'm waiting for is the petrol. The driver change will be a spot on. This only running about 24 seconds now, and they'll be off 30 seconds to get the driver in, change the tyres, on schedule anyway. They don't even know it's raining.
No, you're right there, John. 16, Alan Grice, the Holden Racing Team Commodore. Car number 2 rejoining in 3rd place as Gricey comes down pit straight into the left-hander, blocking one.
Now there is an indication of just how slippery it is out there. Grice going way offline as he tried to turn into Hell Corner. This is very tricky stuff.
Well, we have all the ingredients of a fascinating race here at Mount Panorama today. Don't know whether the weather will in fact clear. It may. We have fog at the top of the mountain as Larry Perkins, who's been running in the top 6 all morning, brings his number 11 Bob Jane T-MART's Commodore into the pits to hand over.
They're coming in for a full set of wets, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to say, Doug, see the aquaplaning, the tyre locking up as it's even coming at that slow speed into pit straight.
Larry steps out of the car, unlike most of the other drivers, he now has to engineer the rest of the day's racing for Steve Harrington. So Larry really is a one-man band.
Steve Harrington gets himself strapped into the car. Change all 4 tyres. Fuel going in as well.
Pretty quiet at the top of the mountain. That'll give you an idea.
An absolute deluge at this stage. And it is remarkable. 20 years ago to the day since we last had a wet Bathurst.
Car number 11, of course, in 9th position. Car number 18, Greg Crick. Terry SHIEL sharing that car with Greg as he comes beneath the Bridgestone Bridge. One heads off to the pits as the Shell Sierra continues down Conrod Straight.
It's going to be very interesting to see the times Jimmy Richards is doing on a full set of wets. We've seen the 217s, we've seen the high 30s. What's he going to do on a full set of wets with this four-wheel drive advantage?
Meanwhile, John Bow at the wheel of car 17. If you ever want to drive a handful around Mount Panorama, I reckon this will be the car. Sierras have never been renowned for their instant throttle response.
Like arm wrestling with a gorilla.
Well, info from the Larry Perkins pits. The tyres were absolutely useless when Larry came in for the pit stop. Right down, the right rear was down to the canvas. Let's check them out for you on our Caltex race score, how they run on the road at the moment. No doubt about who's leading this race. Jimmy Richards and Mark Scape. This was at the completion of lap 30, putting Neil Crompton and Anders Olofsson up into the second spot. Johnson and Bow run third, and the Shell Sierra fourth is Percy and Grice in the HRT Commodore, and fifth is Perkins and Harrington in the T-MART Commodore. Sixth spot, GIBSON Onslow in the GIO Nissan GTR. Seventh, number 25. Keep an eye on that one today. Tony Longhurst and Venezuela's Johnny Cicotto. Eighth is 30, Glenn Seaton and Alan Jones still to drive today. 9th, 15, Mazzara and Jones. And rounding out the 10, Wayne Park and, of course, David Parsons. Don't go away. We'll be back in a moment. Great race across the 7 network. No change in position. Number 1, Jim Richards continues to lead in the Nissan GTR, the four-wheel drive express, coming to the top of Mount Panorama. Still leading from John Bow in car number 17. Let's have a look at something that happened a moment ago with John Bow. A little tap up there.
Move over, Rover.
And that was heading down Conrod Straight.
But Bow
still in second spot. Third, of course, is Neil Crompton in the Nissan, followed by Alan Grice, and then Tony Longhurst in car number 25. Glenn Seaton and Thomas Mazzara. And coming for the pit stop now is Glenn Seaton.
Got the clocks running on this. The return of the Falcon V8 to Bathurst.
Looks like Glenn is going to stay in the V8 and not hand over to Alan Jones for this leg.
Full wet weather tyres going onto the Falcon.
Yes, and during the break, the Mark Gibbs run Onslow. This GTR came in and went from intermediates to full wets as well.
Glenn having a chat.
That'll do. That'll do, he says. He's happy with it. And he's just out in 30 seconds. That's a nice,
that was a good stop. Excellent stop for Glenn Seaton. He stays in the V8 Falcon. Wayne Gardner coming in behind him. Oh, no, it was the Planet Machine.
More cars in pit lane than there are on pit straight.
And, of course, the positive angle of this, even though it benefits the turbo cars, there's Wayne Gardner returning into the pits. Strathfield Car Radios Commodore is sharing with Graham Moore.
Got the back door open. They're going to take a passenger.
Number 30, Glenn Seaton, rejoins the great race in 10th spot. Wayne sits in the car.
Doesn't look too happy. Shaking his head about something. What are they doing? They're putting some ducting in the car to try and get some air blowing on the screen. Obviously, Wayne's having the same problem the other runners are having with the inside of the screen fogging up. Just impossible to see in these conditions. There you are.
It's like Suzuka revisited on 4 wheels, though.
Big bit of ducting. Hang it out the side of the window, bring it around, over the roll bar, point it at the windscreen.
It's just like television, really. A bit of gaffer, you can fix anything. Travelling, somebody.
So there's a bit of ingenuity in the middle of the race. It's going to cost him a lot of time.
Well, I think Wayne will be happy if he can stay up the road there.
Well, he's always said all he wanted to do was survive the race, and he'll be looking to do that. Anyway, car 16, Alan Grice comes back into the pits early. What are they doing here?
Going for a tyre change. They move them along. Yep.
You can see them wiping down the inside of the windscreen there. Everyone's having the same problem.
Not much point spraying the outside. I don't think that's the problem. Although maybe they're getting a bit of oil off the road with the wet conditions.
Another point, we'd had Alan Horsley, of course, running our race centre here. No one should know better than Alan, who engineered Mazda's fabulous effort here in the 12-hour race earlier this year. Information from the pits is when Seaton changed tyres, like Larry Perkins' tyres, his were down to the canvas.
Which is surprising in these sort of weather conditions.
So Glenn Seaton, Peter Jackson, Falcon EB, the Exeter Mazda Forest Elbow.
Well, the real advantage for these 93 spec cars is the rain, I guess, because the same way it benefits the GTR by being able to back off, it doesn't stress these new cars as much, so they may have a better chance.
And of course, they've got that big aerodynamic kit. They've got a lot of downforce, which is going to help them in these conditions.
Yeah, Glenn will appear to be fairly comfortable. Meanwhile, back in the pits, Alan Grice has been in there for over a minute in the car 16.
That will move Tony Longhurst up.
There's a BMW just nestling in against the wall there, you can see in that shot. We'll try and get onto that for you. There are Alan Grice, 1 minute 15. He's been in there for a long, long time. And most of the attention seems to be centering on the windscreen.
Now, here's an interesting fact that's just come to hand. Just put the clock on Jim Richards, who's now out there on full wet tyres. He's going around at 2:41.6, which is 8 seconds slower than Skate was doing on the dry tyres on the slicks.
It's not bad. Richard Hayer's down in the pits. Richie?
Thanks, Mike. Huge problems for Alan Grice. Something as simple as a windscreen wiper, but he can't obviously see through the screen. It's not working properly, and the wiper is actually sliding off the edge of the screen. The problem is that they can't actually get the spanner down to tighten the thing up behind the bonnet line. And the car's been stuck in the pits now for around about 2 minutes. Also problems on the inside of the screen with misting up. Whether something perhaps HRT didn't foresee, but now the car on its way back out of the pits.
Well, thank you. We've got the number 25 car on the approach to Caltex. Yeah, sorry, 2-0. That's the Denny Holm car. Co-driving that with Paul Morris. Now they've got a rescue vehicle out there as well.
And yet the driver's standing there, isn't he? That's
apparently has hit the wall hard there.
Alan
and I would think in the interest of the race, maybe the pace car might even be brought out.
Well, the pace car is just moving up pit lane now. We're going to have the pace car out the track. Alan Grice rejoins in 11th position after being in the pits for almost 2.5 minutes. Oh, topsy-turvy race. This pace car will get out there and bunch up the field once again.
I'm quite surprised. I thought they may have brought the pace car out even earlier today for the Brock car on the edge of the racetrack, but there's not much they can do here.
Well, we're certainly starting to get a bit of wreckage on the side of the track, and with the slippery conditions, there's even greater danger of one of these cars sliding off and hitting the other car. So it's a mandatory safety measure by the organisers here. So the pace car on the track at the moment.
Denny Holm was at the wheel of this car. I'm certain they didn't do a driver change when they came in before for the tyres. Paul Morris, the scheduled co-driver.
Well, that's a surprising event. The car doesn't seem to be damaged bodywork-wise. And
that's shots from our chopper cam, just hovering. Tony Longhurst.
They've got a neck brace on him. I just saw a neck brace on Denny.
I saw that too, Doug. That driver seems to be in some distress.
Well, who's the guy in the helmet?
That's the driver of the crash vehicle.
Oh, I see, right.
And I know this would be causing some concern to our viewers in New Zealand, taking the 7 broadcast through TV3 network. Denny Holm sitting there with the neck brace on. Tony Longhurst, who is in the pits to take over from Johnny CECOTTO.
56-year-old Denny Holm, former World Formula One champion from 1967.
Oh, he's given the wall a thump down Conrod Straight and may have jarred his neck.
He doesn't look at all comfortable there. You can see the angle at which he's holding his head. Champion driver, champion bloke. This is a most unfortunate incident.
Well, there is the pace car.
The pace car should come out, just hold them up and pick up the leaders.
And you can see the diabolical conditions of Mount Panorama now. The skies are getting darker, the rain is getting heavier. There's the white flag, signalling official vehicle on the circuit.
Well, that was an awful piece of news.
Yes, it's bad luck. Denny's sitting there in the car being attended to by the rescue crew. Good move from race organisers, bring out the pace car and give free access to the vehicle on Conrod Straight. There you can see the rescue vehicle was there very quickly. They're located at several points around the circuit.
So this pace car activity will certainly bunch up the field. Just what the positions will be, we won't know because there's been so many tyre changes in a very short period of time, but we will have that for you as soon as we can.
We're on lap 37 of the race with the pace car out. Here comes the ambulance now around to this crash site with the 20 Benson and Hedges car in the wall. We checked the Caltex race score. Richards and Scaife continue to lead the field in the number 1 Nissan ahead of Dick Johnson's Shell Sierra car 17. Then the second of the Nissan's car 2, Neil Crompton now at the wheel there. Johnny CECOTTO at the wheel of the 25 Benson and Hedges car in 4th place. And the Percy Grice HRT Commodore VP is in 5th position. In 6th, the Quinella for the HRT team. Brad Jones now at the wheel of car 15, followed by Steve Harrington driving the Larry Perkins entry, number 11 Commodore. The GIBBS Onslow GTR in 8th position. Park and Parsons, car 35, the Nissan in 9th place. And SHIEL and CRICK in the second of the Shell Sierra cars, car 18, rounding out the top 10.
Ambulance has arrived on the scene. We believe Denny Holm is unconscious, about to be extricated from that car and taken down to the medical centre. Let's take a look at an incident we have here and see exactly what happened. Most of our cameras all ISO. This looks like Denny Holm coming down. He's got a wheel out on the grass.
He's aquaplaned, you see, in the wet.
He's offline and
he's clouded the wall there, and it's brought him across the racetrack.
Now, that doesn't look that dramatic, but you see what's happened is he's flicked his head sideways. You've got that support behind your head, but you haven't got the lateral support, and it's obviously damaged his neck in some way.
And there is Denny pulling the car up. So
he must have been conscious at that time.
Yes, he was, obviously, to put the brakes on. And the ambulance officers on the circuit, pace car still out there, and he was in 14th position with this incident. They'll take the opportunity now that they have Denny out of the car. He'll be heading to the medical centre. And it is very well manned here at Mount Panorama. Tony Longhurst, what a worrying time for Tony. He's had Johnny CECOTTO out in his car. He's ready to take over his second car now. He's seen out of it, and Frank Gardner, I would say, would be using a wise head just to calm him down. Meanwhile, the Nissan pace car brings the field around.
It looked very much like the front left tyre may have been gone on Denny Hume's car. In that replay, it looked very much like he might have lost the front left tyre, which would have caused him to move over to the wall like that.
Yes, but once you get off the racetrack here and as wet as it is onto the grass, you've got absolutely nothing going for you. As you can see, fog rolling in on the top of the mountain. The lights are on.
Brad Jones came in while the pace car was out during the break. Car number 15, once again, to clear the windscreen. This is something of a problem for the Commodore drivers.
Yes, you wouldn't have thought of that before the start of the race. The order is still Jimmy Richards leading in the Winfield Nissan, car number 1. John Bow in car number 17, the Dick Johnson Shell Sierra, runs in second. Neil Crompton, who has taken over from Anders Olofsson in the number 2 Winfield Nissan, runs in 3rd spot. He'd be delighted with that. Neil's on wheels. And in 4th place is number 25, Johnny CECOTTO, and that is an outstanding performance so far. And still to hand over to Tony Longhurst. So Denny Holm about to go to the medical centre, and they'll have the tow truck into position to take his car off the racetrack there.
Well, the way conditions are changing. Like I said, a remarkable performance from Johnny CECOTTO, Tony Longhurst, car 25 currently in 4th position. Now with the pace car lap, of course, it'll bunch the field up. And we have a new race all over again. Continuing the top 10, car 15, the Mazzara Jones Commodore is in 6th. Larry Perkins hanging on to 7th position. Car 4, the GIBBS Onslow GIO GTR in 8th. Parsons and Park and the other Peter Jackson Sierra in 9th. And rounding out the top 10, car 18, the second of the Shell Sierras.
I think field filing past the scene here at this accident involving Denny Holm, and all of the competitors as they file past will be concerned because he's been around a long time and he's been a great friend and advisor to a lot of the drivers here at Mount Panorama.
We'll keep you updated of Denny's condition as soon as we have it direct from the medical centre. Pace car, of course, coming out onto the circuit very quickly and bringing the cars to a stop. I would think hopefully the race organisers would then move some of those lap cars up so the pace car actually then holds the top 4 or 5 cars. At the moment we we have lap cars sitting in the middle of the field, or whether or not they'll bring the fast cars to the front of the field.
This would be very disappointing for Frank Gardner.
Would be shattering for Frank.
I mean, apart from the tragedy of Denny's injury, and we're yet to establish the severity of that injury, the BMWs had such a terrific future in these conditions. They would probably benefit second behind Nissan GTRs in this kind of weather.
Notice Thomas, or Brad Jones it was, going past then in the queue with a rag wiping the windscreen inside, so they do have a foggy problem inside.
Seaton is in again, and Brock and Madecki in also. People taking advantage of this pace car to sort out their problems.
There's the ambulance moving down Conrod Straight to Caltex Chase, then take Denny into the medical centre, as I said here, which is located near the pits.
You can see how quiet he's going. These neck injuries are pretty tricky items, and they wouldn't want to bump him in any way.
We've had all the conditions today, the race starting under the threat of rain.
It's getting worse, by the way, the weather. Rain hasn't got any heavier for the moment, but the cloud cover is just getting lower and lower.
Interesting to see how long it takes for 1,000 Ks in a wet race at Mount Panorama at Bathurst.
I mentioned that Seaton had come in again, Mike, Brock and Madecki. All of those cars had come in to have their windscreens cleaned. Quite remarkable. The ambulance is going straight to the hospital, we've just been informed. They're not going to the medical centre, they are going straight to the hospital.
We'll keep you up to date with Denny Holmes' condition from the hospital as soon as we have it. In the meantime, I think they need the tow trucks in to remove the B&H BMW.
It's interesting to see, as you say, Mike, but they let the field form up in their positions. At the moment, the leading car, number 1, is behind CECOTTO in car 25. So they'll probably hold station until the track's clear, and maybe we'll see them form up in the correct positions before they go back to the green.
See, that's sometimes how racing luck plays for you. I guess if they came in behind the race leader, or brought Jimmy Richards up behind the pace car, the first 5 or 6 then lined up, at this stage, CECOTTO could well go down a lap as soon as the pace car pulls off the circuit.
That's right.
The other hassle is that so many of the fast cars are behind slower cars, and in these conditions they're going to have to get round them, and it's going to add another spice to the mix.
Extraordinary weather conditions. There's Denny's car being loaded onto the rescue truck. Just with New South Wales in the grip of one of its worst droughts in history, 2/3 of the state in drought conditions. One Sunday in 365 days it decides to pour down.
Although the record of the race has been reasonably good. It's been a dry race for ages. I think you went back to the Bartlett when the very wet day. Then, of course, we had the rain-interrupted race.
1987.
Of 87.
The year of Glenn Seaton, even though he didn't win anything, he was certainly the most spectacular driver here.
So it's been a reasonably dry period for the Tooheys 1000, and, of course, the Hardy Classic before that. But it throws everything up. It's certainly playing well and truly into the hands of the Nissan drivers today with the advantage of the four-wheel drive, and they're doing it very, very comfortably indeed. 17, John Bowe out there still running in second spot, and Neil Crompton into third in the number 2 car.
4th place, as we've said, held by the 25 Benson and Hedges car, Tony Longhurst and Johnny CECOTTO. CECOTTO driving at the moment, and strictly for those punters in New South Wales, where the TAB is betting trifecta on the running of the great race. Don't be confused. On the TAB betting sheets, yes, the Longhurst car is number 12, but the actual race car number is 25. So if you put your money on number 12, you haven't made a mistake. Everything's all right.
Gary, settle down. It's not three-way turf talk.
Well, the field continues to circulate behind the pace car. Shouldn't be long before they have the Denny Holm car back in the pits. Let's update you now on the Caltex race score. Jimmy Richards continues to lead the great race the Winfield Nissan GTR. Second on the road at the moment is John Bow and Dick Johnson's Shell Sierra. Third is Neil Crompton in the second of the Winfield Nissan GTRs. Fourth, number 25, is Johnny CECOTTO. And rounding out the 5, number 15, Bradley Jones at the wheel of the HRT Commodore. Back in a sec.
Crunch.
He's given that plenty on the exit to Repco. And 31.
Robbie Kerr.
The Kiwi gets it around sideways, but is able to keep it off the wall.
And Denny Holm, once again, a nasty glance off that concrete wall.
It just doesn't look that dramatic. You can't imagine somebody being hospitalised after a bump like that.
I was amazed at the lack of damage of the car. We had the close-up from the chopper cam on the repair truck.
It didn't even lose paint, did it?
No. Well, we'll have an update from the hospital and keep you informed during the course of today's telecast.
So, car's holding position. Nissan still in first position. Dick Johnson in second. Second Nissan. Neil Crompton at the wheel in third position. Tony Longhurst. Johnny CECOTTO at the wheel now, I believe, in car 25. Alan Grice in the HRT car 16 in fifth position. As Trevor Ashby.
They're bringing in the Lansvale Smash Repairs, the Dulux Auto Colour machine.
They couldn't get the wheel off before. They brought it in to change tyres and couldn't get, I think it was the right wheel. We're looking at it now. Front right wheel off, and they're trying to get that off now. Richard Hay is in the pits.
Thank you, Doug. You're absolutely right. That's exactly the problem. The wheel nut is stuck on. They sent him back out so that they didn't lose any more time earlier on. Now they're pouring cold water on it. The metal, obviously, the metal of the hub actually expands when it gets to a very high temperature, and it's expanded at a faster rate than the nut itself, hence it's kept the nut locked on. That's the problem, and there's still no joy in getting that wheel off.
Well, I don't know about pouring cold water on it. It's poured cold water on their chances.
There's all sorts of debate about these single lock wheel nuts. Oh, there they go. They've got it off at last. And they're still taking advantage of this, the queue, but unfortunately,
they were in 12th position.
They'll probably drop a lap. I think they'll close the pit exit. If they can get out now.
They'll need to do it right now, though. They can't afford to waste any more time.
Go Trevor. He was in 12th. He'd hate to lose that position.
The whistles blow. Trevor gets back into the action. And let's see.
He'll make it.
He's okay. Well, that's all right for the Lansvale Smash Repair boys. Took advantage of the pace lap. Got that stuck wheel off. Yellow flag still out. Pace car still on the circuit. As you can see, conditions absolutely atrocious.
Good shot of the punters and the crowd behind the pace car. The lights are out, so we're heading back to a restart. As they come down the Conrod Straight this time. Jimmy Richards, the number 1 Winfield Nissan GTR, is going to throw a few cards in the air because Johnny CECOTTO, I believe, was fairly close to making a change with the Tony Longhurst. They come around. Don't forget, right across Australia, this is for our Australian viewers, we have an opportunity today to nominate that number 0055-60375. We'll leave that up for a moment. You can give that a call, nominate who you think will finish first, second and third in the great race today. And the lines are open till 4 o'clock, so you can't hang on the phone until 5 minutes before the race finishes. 0055-60375. You give your number and, of course, your name, and then nominate the 3 car numbers you think will finish, and you could win a trip to the Indy 500.
I bet everybody that rang in the first hour has rung back.
Yes, I bet they have. It's going to change all day. Good competition, that. You can win a trip to the for 2, courtesy of Jet Set Tours, to the 93 Indy 500 and 6 nights accommodation. In the meantime, we have the pace car. The lights are off.
The sky is falling up on top of the mountain. I mean, you can't see up there.
Saturation point. Now Panorama. Tail of gloom hanging over.
Oh, pace car heads to the pits, and the great race resumes with Jimmy Richards, car number 1, the Winfield Nissan.
The Rainmaster aboard the car, renowned as the Rainmaster.
And isn't that a bonus? He's at least going to get a few laps without any cars in front of him now, so he's not going to have to worry about any of that. And just look at him take off. The 4-wheel drive, this ad GTR.
Bye-bye. He's just spread eagle the field on pit straight. Scored 100, 200 metres on them already.
Dillman Cotter, Impala Kitchen's car going through. It's down the lap. And that will give you some idea of the advantages of a four-wheel drive touring car in the wet.
Look at this thing. Over 500 horsepower, the spray punching off four wheels. Undoubtedly one of the best touring car drivers in the world at the wheel. 44-year-old Jimmy Richards, originally from New Zealand. Went on to a tremendous racing career in Australia. 4 times Australian touring car champion, 3 times Bathurst winner. A guy with 4 times Bathurst winner. I'll take it back. 19th Bathurst start, a guy with enormous experience, and he will revel in these conditions. You can just see on the surface of the road there the amount of rain that's falling on Mount Panorama. It is a deluge.
Jimmy Richards will be so pleased to be out of that spray. Here's that Lansvale Commodore again. Trevor Ashby, what is the problem this time? Mechanical.
Everything was going smooth for them the first quarter of the race, and they've been in now a couple of times.
Bad luck for these guys. They've made increasingly improved performances at Bathurst over the years. They were certainly hoping for a top 5 finish here, but problems fairly early in the race. What are we, almost 2 hours into the event now? The bonnet's up, the engine revving, and there's some sort of problem below the bonnet of the Lansvale Smash Repair's Commodore VN. We go in closer. Engine shut down.
Engine's off. Lap 43, 161. Oops. I thought that was a wide approach, but under normal circumstances, I didn't allow for its four-wheel drive capabilities. Doesn't it turn nicely?
Remarkable amount of brake noise coming from the Nissan GTRs all week. When they've been coming into the pits, or you even heard there, a really loud squeal.
We noticed that in practice. In fact, I was suggesting they were having transmission problems.
Well, look at Jim. He's making this race his own as he sprints off into the distance.
They're probably using extremely hard pads. I'd say that's what it is. That's where we're getting the noise from.
Let's go down to Johnny Brady in the pits.
Yes, thanks, Mike. The problem with the Lansvale car is they've got a missing. It just keeps missing as it's going along. They've got a spare set of plugs out there. Try and take through all of that and just see what they can sort that way. The rain obviously is not helping things one little bit, but water's got into the thing as well. I reckon that might be causing the problem in the electrics, but it's a bit of a lottery with these things, particularly when they get wet, because there's so much computer gear on them. A miss can be a very hard thing to spot, particularly when you're throwing a bit of rain over all the electrical gear, and that's what's happened now. It becomes something like a jigsaw puzzle of a race to put it back together. Revving it up now, and largely what they can do is just take it out and see if the miss keeps reoccurring. But it's certainly a problem made harder by the wet, and as you can see, they're still not happy with it, so they've turned her off and they're back under the bonnet again.
Thanks, Johnny Brady. Jim Richards, meanwhile, carving his own niche around this 6.2-kilometre circuit. Look at the rain. Just enormous plumes of spray coming out. As we say that, Steve Harrington...
Larry Perkins coming in very slowly.
Steve Harrington at the wheel, limping into pit lane. And this will be one of the most unexpected failures. If this car's having mechanical drama, he's looking for a push. Deary me.
Well, the crew have gone running down pit lane to try and get him up into position. But Steve Harrington, who took over Larry, done such a fine job early in the race. And the car has quit on them.
There's one thing you see very rarely on a Perkins car, and that's some mechanical failure. He builds them like tanks. And here comes the crew pushing it. They've got a fairly long push, about 150 metres back to the Perkins pit bay.
Well, that is a real surprise. Perkins so consistent, did so well at Sandown. The car was in the 14s in the top 10 shootout, and now obviously bereft of power. Here we are, another drama.
Really is surprising. Larry was in 5th position. Or
this is the Wayne Park 35 car, the Peter Jackson Sierra.
He's given the wall a severe clout.
He was lucky to get back.
So there'll be all sorts of damage under their brake ducts. You can see the brake duct there damaged, front spoiler, all sorts of stuff. 35 was in the top 10, position 9 they were running in difficult conditions, which was a good effort. Now it appears to have come to naught. Anyway, back at Larry Perkins' pit.
Very busy time, Richard Hay.
Certainly is. They're not absolutely sure what the problem is. I tell you, it's mayhem down here in pit lane. The rain is pouring down. Perkins' car was being pushed up the pit lane while the Wayne Park Sierra was coming in, which has been involved in an incident. They've got the car fired up again now. it looks like it might well be some sort of a fuel pump problem. So they've got the boot up, but it's definitely electrical. I heard Mark earlier on saying it's fairly rare that you get a mechanical problem with a Perkins car. I'm sure that this is electrical.
Richard, have you been able to put a finger on why these Commodores are suffering the foggy windows?
I'd say it's because they're all brand new, and they're just not used to having to run them in these sort of conditions. It's a long time since we've had a wet Bathurst, remember?
Yeah.
It could be that lack of experience with the car and the conditions, because the Seaton car had the same problem. They were in wiping the windscreen earlier as well. Another car which hasn't been tested in all sorts of weather.
See what good use they put gaffer tape to?
Yes, travelling, somebody.
Staging cruise delight. 100-mile-an-hour tape strapped all over the front of the 35 car.
It'll be interesting to see if his steering geometry hasn't been affected by that vehicle.
Looks like he gave something a severe clout there. Meanwhile, back in Larry's car, in the boot of the car.
Well, our information is that John Bower and the PJ car came together, and Bower's expected back into the pits in just a matter of moments.
With damage to the rear.
So
extraordinary rate of attrition and crashes, and we've just gone 2 hours in the event. This sort of thing can win or lose motor races. Certainly if the Nissan team continues circulating clean into a set lap time. It's looking tough. And Glenn, there he is, still suffering that demisting problem. They're trying to wipe down the inside of the screen, spraying copious amounts of anti-fog. It doesn't seem to be doing too much. As Neil Crompton now moves to position 2 in the field. So Nissan first and second. John Bower obviously suffering from that little biff he had on Conrod Straight.
There's JB.
Left rear in tatters.
And has he got a guard against the...
I think that's just spray, Mike. It's hard to tell, but I think that's just water.
Look at these conditions. Disappearing off into the mist. A real cloud has closed down on the top of the mountain.
In fact, there's so much spray you can't tell if there's any smoke in there at all.
So JB in the Shell Sierra comes across the top of the mountain. Back with Glenn Seaton, the number 30, Peter Jackson, Falcon V8. Out he goes again as we go back to number 17, JB, to see whether or not he is headed. Them to take a look at the car. What a pleasant afternoon, hurtling around here with a turbocharged 4 Sierra and trying to keep the thing on the island.
We've got a spin, I believe, Michael.
Yep, have a look at that on replay. And that, of course,
Kevin Waldock.
Is Kevin Waldock in the playscape, but not play safe.
You won't escape that.
Yeah, that's not bad, actually.
Well,
Kevin, great four-wheel drive advantages.
He's kept the boot into it.
Has he done that? He's absolutely... and
well
got out.
That's a genius effort.
And he gives the wave.
The playscape Ampol Sierra that John Hewson is masterminding the pit stops.
Bit of off-road ability. Now,
There's JB.
Bow is going very, very slowly on this lap.
All that water, and now a bit of sand. It's like a day at the beach there. Apparently the sand goes harder when it gets wet, Mike, which is why people can escape it in these conditions, whereas normally they'd be there for the rest of the day.
He was very lucky. Good driving there on the part of Kevin Waldock.
John Bow staying out there.
I don't think maybe he has a lot of damage. That looks superficial, but he was given it something underneath.
I think his only problem is trying to drive a Ford Sierra in the rain, and we'll just listen to how gingerly he applies the power in this car. Yeah.
Just listen to the wheels buzzing.
You hear that turbo come on like a bomb. Heaps of wheel spin. Not conditions suited to this high boost turbo forward.
Thanks to Dunlop, our race cam, we can bring you the pictures out of the Dick Johnson car as JB heads up to Repco. You don't fully appreciate the conditions that the drivers are facing here today. It is just awesome, this racetrack, just to drive around it during the week. And if anyone has the opportunity to do that, and as you remember back to today's very wet race, we now have Steve Harrington back out. They had a problem. It was either the battery or the pump, according to Alan Horsley here in our race centre.
John Bower, by the way, is happy with the way the car is performing. Despite that damage, it's pretty superficial, apparently. He's got no intention of coming in at this stage.
Harrington guides it through there.
Seems to be running fine now.
One of the baby car class machines hanging off to the left. And I think those guys in the Corolla class have done a fabulous job today. There haven't been too many incidents with the faster cars. And
speaking of which, in that category, car 70 leads the way. That's the entry driven by the Bates twins from Canberra. Well, they'd have plenty of experience in these kind of conditions, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Car 74 in the 1600cc class is in second spot, the Peter Verheyen entry, which he shares with Jeffrey Full, the man who's won that category the past 2 years here with other co-drivers. In fact, he drove with Paul Morris to win it last year. Morris now with the B&H team, but his car out of action. And third spot in the 16cc class held down by the Bargwana cousins. These cars, all the cars in that category are Corollas, of course.
Yeah, Corollas had the under 1600cc category shot to bits for a while.
That's why they call it CC, Corolla category.
Very good.
Steve Harrington fairly tentative, but the car seems to be on song.
Yeah, I'll be interested to know what that little hitch was. Larry and his crew seem to cure it fairly quickly. Richard Hay was saying before, an electrical problem apparently. But this race going topsy-turvy. There's so many pit changes, tyre changes, mechanical problems, crashes, pace car laps. There's so much happening at once. It's quite difficult to keep a finger on exactly what's going on. Positions stabilising now as the rain comes down even stronger. And no doubt about the sharp end of the field. Nissan 1-2.
Now, we have had that confirmed. The problem was definitely a battery problem with the Larry Perkins car.
Okay. And there is our leader, Jim Richards, making it look all so easy, even though it'll be very difficult out there. Let's take a look on the Caltex race score. Richards and Scaife, of course, leading this race handsomely from Olafson, Crompton at the wheel at the moment. Number 17, Johnson and Bow. Sierra looking a bit worse for wear, but still hanging into third. Position 4, Longhurst and CECOTTO hanging on to fourth position in car 25. Rounding out the top 5, car 4, GIBBS and Onslow. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment.
Well, the second hour gone here at Bathurst, and you could sum it up in 3 words: rain, rain, and more rain. That's caused a lot of action in the pits. Let's have a look at, first of all, at Grice and Percy combination bringing their V8 Commodore in for a change to the wet conditions. And think of Wayne Gardner, how he felt in his first stint driving a touring car in the rain. The first casualty there, the 26 car, Gem Spares Commodore. And Mark Scaife, the race leader, came in for a change of driver with Jim Richards. Out on the track, Glenn Seaton had time for a quick drink. Might be cold outside, but gee, it's hot inside those fire suits. And this didn't look to be very much in this at all, but Denny Holm in the number 20 BMW careened into the wall there, gradually brought the car to a stop, and that brought out the pace car because they required medical attention there quite urgently. The ambulance brought out for the 1967 Formula One champion. He's been coming here for 10 years now, and that's by far the most unpleasant drive for Denny Holm. And of course, Godzilla, Jim Richards at the wheel, breathing four-wheel drive fire as they race through what has become a fountain on the mountain.
Thank you, Cameron Williams, bringing us right up to date there with second hour of the Tooheys 1000 from Mount Panorama at Bathurst. You know, the more just looking at the replay there, as Cameron was talking us through that incident with Denny Holm, I'm almost convinced, boys, that after Denny hit the wall initially, he may have jumped on the brakes and looked as though he may have been unconscious then after striking the wall. The car just glided down, washed off its speed and stopped. But, gee, that was a heavy cloud on the wall.
So Jim Richards continues on through the spray. This car, out of all the cars in this field, is by far the most comfortable in these difficult conditions. And the beauty of this car is that they can set it up to exactly how they want it for these conditions. All sorts of variations in the torque split from front to rear. They've got some great Yokohama tyres. as we say that.
Bradley Jones, by the look of it, coming in for his pit stop.
He's just trickling down pit lane.
Yeah, that's Bradley coming in now, car number 15. Order still the number 1 Winfield Nissan over the 2 car. Cromley at the wheel. John Bow runs in 3rd. Tony Longhurst, Johnny CECOTTO is in 4th place. There's Mark Gibbs in the GIO Commodore.
Regulation stop, hands raised in the air. Still plenty of drama going on inside the cockpit of these cars.
Mark Gibbs in the GIO Nissan,
which has a dent in the door, I notice. Obviously involved in an incident. Speaking of incidents, while we were in the break, Mike, I saw Steve Harrington, who I said looked fairly tentative, have a moment at the end of Conrod.
Yes, slide off there. He's able to catch it and refire the engine and head back out again.
Dropped a few spots.
Yeah, it has dropped a couple of spots there.
Their problems continue.
So 15 cars still in the pits there for 48, 49 seconds. And meanwhile, the Moffat car back in as well. Prolific range of pit stops here as the rain continues to bucket down and turn this race upside down.
It's a tough old day for not only the pit crews, also a pretty tough old day for our 7 crew here at Mount Panorama. Sparing a thought for all those guys out on the 30-odd cameras around the circuit. Very unpleasant. And those working the pits. Let's go down to Richie.
Thanks, Mike. Well, the problem with the 9 car is that it's had a misfire. They're not quite sure what the problem is, but they are fairly sure that it has something to do with the wet weather. They've taken the opportunity to change the tyres and refuel the car as well.
Alan Moffat, we noticed there, Richie, also helping out to try and defog the car.
Sure, I asked him if he wanted to have a quick word with you, and he said after Charlie's had his pit stop, Charlie O'Brien's got out of the car and Gary Brabham's got in, and still working away underneath the bonnet to see if they can isolate just what the problem is with the misfire.
There's the number 25 car. Thanks for that, Richie. Heading down Conrod Straight.
Lights ablaze, punching holes through the gathering gloom. He swings down into Caltech's chase. Johnny CECOTTO.
He's had a long stint in that car, really.
Sure has.
Yet another drama in the pits. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Mark, but car 15, the Thomas Mazzera Brad Jones car, has a blown fuse, and it's the wiper fuse.
Oh, dear. Thanks, Dougie.
Amazing.
Could have used the line, it never rains but it pours, but it didn't seem appropriate, did it?
Car 25 still hanging on to 4th position outright.
They were drying the electrics in the Moffat car, hopefully trying to cure a mess that they thought it was that simple. Meantime, Johnny CECOTTO of Venezuela. Gee, he's broken that loose. Listen to that rev as it heads up the hill. Tony Longhurst is yet to actually put his backside in the B&H car today.
No end of courage or experience, Johnny CECOTTO. I reckon any guy who can ride a motorcycle 300 kilometres an hour can certainly handle a car all right. He's proved that in his short but very successful touring car career. And
whoa, hang on there, Johnny.
Late braking in the wet, the back starts to break away. CECOTTO, great car control in very difficult conditions, brings it back into line. And look at the nest up here. I suggest that they all run their headlights on. So CECOTTO emerging out of the spray at the back of one of Alan Moffat's Sierras. Look at the cars slipping and sliding for grip as they gingerly feed the power in. Not well suited to these conditions.
That's Gary Brabham, and he hasn't seen, I don't believe.
Oh, Johnny's got the lights on.
Johnny would remember that part of the mountain. So a lot of BMW drivers a few years ago, Dougie.
Yes. Because it was Johnny who had the moment in the car this morning. They've obviously rebuilt it and rebuilt it well. The car's steering well. It's just carving up the Sierra there in this rain.
Car 10 running in front of CECOTTO here. Position 10. 2 laps down. 2 laps down on the Nissans, yeah. Just shows the level of performance and the smooth running of the GIBSON motorsport operation.
About to overhaul Bob Holden in the 73 Corolla.
Gary Brabham down there very, very quickly indeed. Well, it's been a topsy-turvy race so far for the Synovus Vitamins team. Alan Moffat's hanging in there with it. Alan, thanks for joining us. I know you're busy.
No trouble, mate.
Tell us about some of the problems.
Well, the very first one, all throughout practice, Charlie never locked up one brake, and then 3 laps into the race, he got a flat spot, cost him his tire, so that set him back rather nastily. Well, Klaus burned up a set of rain tires, and out for a long time on dry tires, trying to outguess the weather. Finally had to succumb to the wet tires, and has just come in prematurely as far as the fuel is concerned, because every time we stop, we fill it up with the juice, and complaining about a misfire. I think there's so much water on the track, we may have got something into our motronics. We've changed the spark plugs, splashed our CRC 556 all over everything in the engine bay, and tried to keep laughing. It's a great product.
He's always looked after his sponsors,
Gary has taken over from Charlie and back out there. Klaus is doing a great job, a bit too aggressive for my liking from what I can see of him coming onto pit straight, but he's a professional driver, and their orders are to bring them home alive.
Yes, I was going to say, it's early days yet, but can you remember a topsy-turvy 1000 like this?
Well, only when I was behind the wheel myself, Mike. Peter Brock and I had a hell of a up and down in 1972, and the track got the better of me, and Peter went on to win in his XU1. But no, in the last 10, 15 years, we haven't seen anything as nasty as this.
Well, you've still got the two of them out there running. I hope you can cure the problem with the electronics, and thanks for joining us. We'll come back and talk to you a little later.
Anytime, glad to help, man. Bye.
Thank you, Alan.
Car 9, just saw going out of shot there, rejoined in 19th position, and look at that.
Now that will give you some idea of the fog on top of Mount Panorama.
As you said earlier, Wilco, a cloud has descended on top of it.
Sure has.
Vision down, minimal levels.
Now, these are appalling conditions to be behind the wheel under any circumstances, let alone in a motor race like this.
Just look at the way Klaus Needsvitz is fighting this Sierra. Every time he gets on the power, the back wants to break away.
And of course, it's so hard to control with that turbo boost coming in so suddenly, giving you what, an extra 80, 90, 100 more horsepower in one big hit like that.
Well, Dick Johnson once described it as going from a 140 horsepower 2-litre car to a 500 horsepower V8, as you say, with the click of a finger. So trying to drive a car with those sort of throttle responses and conditions this difficult would take a real expert.
Tough on the motor too, not just difficult to keep control of the car, but when the wheels break loose like that and you get that big rush of revs, it's hard on the motor.
Absolutely. Car number 4 is the GIO Nissan GTR, Rowan Onslow, Mark Gibbs.
Left-hand side of it's been caved in. He's had a decent bang there. He's got no more ventilation problems because the window's gone completely on that left-hand side of the car as well.
Apparently Gibbs was involved in the same accident that damaged the back of the 17 car with John Bowe at the wheel. Also involved Wayne Park, and that would explain this enormous dent in the side of the GIO car.
Yeah, very concave, isn't it?
Well, it's had a fair working over.
There's been some...
At least the windscreen's cleared out.
Yeah, the windscreen O'Brien's fine, and they're putting the policy in for a check at GIO tomorrow.
Should be able to get a cheap quote.
The car continues. Mark Gibbs, Rowan Onslow, Bob Forbes Racing. They do a fabulous job. Been involved in the sport for many years. Bob himself, a former great race competitor.
You can see the difficulty for these guys seeing out the back of their car and the front of the car. Look at the damage there on the GIO. Quite a severe hit in the door. And if it's difficult to look at it on television, you can imagine it's doubly difficult inside the cockpit of a touring car.
To BP Cutting, the Gibbs Onslow GIO machine. Gee, they look stable out of there, don't they? The four-wheel drives, it's all the power down on the road.
They're just made for these very difficult conditions.
Fred couldn't have ordered anything better for this. We have the O'Brien Brabham car coming back into the pits. Alan Moffat, who was talking to us, was telling us they're having problems with the electronics in the car. Alan allowing Rudy Eggenberger, you can see they're walking around the front of the car, the red and blue jacket.
You can see the black tape over the brake ducts on the front spoiler of the car. They're trying to get as much temperature in the brakes as they can. It's very cold out there. Gary Brabham talking with Alan Moffat.
Alan supervising. He knows what it's all about. He's driven here for so many years. 4 Bathurst wins. Yeah, I'd say expecting the second car in, so he's consulted and been sent on his way. They want to get Klaus in and get Klaus out pretty quickly.
We mentioned before they only have the one gantry there, so they can't have the 2 cars in at once. They have to send this car out, the O'Brien Brabham car out, in order to get Klaus in and look after him, and clearly that's what they've done.
I hope it makes it around. It sounded a bit...
Sounds like a severe misfire.
Yeah.
As Gary rejoined the circuit. Oh, there she goes.
You'd never forgive yourself sending him back out to bring the other one in and having one stall at the top of the mount.
It's remarkable after 6 years of the trouble having with these cars. If we look at the top points, number 1, Richard Scaife, Volleson and Crompton second. Longhurst CECOTTO move up to third. They're continuing their way forward. Car 17, Johnson Bow hanging on to fourth. GIBBS and Onslow, car 4 in fifth position. It's getting more and more drama here. Don't go away.
Planning on a pit stop in the next lap or so. He might have to come in for one in the MOBIL Commodore, car number 05. I'll show you an incident that happened at Mazda Forest Elba. Car 18 as well having a problem. That's the Greek CRICK, Terry SHIEL. And they were able to be missed by the second of the MOBIL Commodores. We'll show you that as soon as we have the incident. The Brock had a lose at Forest Elba.
They must pull him in. That is definitely going to go at some stage.
Yeah,
And when it goes, it'll be a problem.
Well, day of dramas at Mount Panorama. Peter Brock continues. Tony Longhurst has certainly had a very eventful day so far, but he hasn't stepped into the car yet. Tony, thanks for joining us, mate. I know about another 5 or 6 laps before you get to race.
We're going to try to get through to about 62, so I think about 8 laps.
How's the game plan going for the 25 car, considering the interruption this morning?
Well, except for the interruption this morning, it's been spot on. Johnny's doing a great job. He just did his fastest lap in the wet there. I don't know what you do about slowing these distance down there.
I don't think you can do anything about that, Tony.
Yeah.
The conditions, can you remember them being any more deplorable than this year?
The end of 87, the last hour wasn't too clever, but it's very miserable. It's no good for anyone. All our boys, they're all wet. Everyone's going to have colds this week. Just got to soldier on.
So what are the strengths now of the BMW?